Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Finance and Corporate Services. We have a very busy day today. On that, I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that because it's so busy and we have so many important items, I will be sticking a bit closer to our rules of procedure. I just want to give everyone fair warning. Please keep your questions in question period and your comments in comment period. I just don't want to see any of the important items today get decreased time because of inappropriate comments and questions. Okay. With that, there is no presentation for item number 1, the user fee review. So we will get right into questions. Councillor Fernandez.
I just wanted to follow up with your comment about the length of the day. I think it's important we encourage our staff to get up and move every few hours. I think it's very important for our health and safety today to make sure that after at least a 2-hour period that we get up and move around for about 5 minutes. And I'm going to put my clock and timer on for that.
I agree 100%, and yes, if anyone cares to remind me, I would be more than happy to accommodate. And sorry, Councillor Hernandez, before we get to the delegation.
Are we the questions to staff right now?
No, sorry, delegation first, and then my mistake. Yeah. So our delegation this item is Ms. Laurie Conkle. Good morning. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation, and welcome.
Good morning, Council. Thank you very much for having me here to speak to you today. I'm actually up from the city of Hamilton, and the reason I brought this to your attention is because my father has actually been the mayor of the town I grew up in for 27 years and an alderman before that, and without his help and his guidance I would have never known what to do. So recently I held the Parent Bazaar sale at local Binghamton's Funworks. I held it twice, once in March and once in September, and I was charged your temporary retail market license of $526. So over $1,000 to hold what is essentially a mom-to-mom sale, which is a tabled sale where parents rent a table for $30 and sell their used children's items directly to other parents. The $30 goes as how I pay Binghamton's, it's how I insure the sale, it's how I hire staff. And so needless to say, I was really shocked when the City of Kitchener called me up and said, oh, by the way, you also need to pay us $526 to operate this sale. I hadn't budgeted for that, and when I tried to work with the city to reduce the fee, I was told, well, this fee was in place to protect existing brick and mortar. It was, if I got my fee reduced, then they'd have to reduce everyone else's. I was basically given the option, you either pay this fee, you don't operate the sale in Binghamton's, or you face a $50,000 fine because I happen to be incorporated if I operate without a license. What I thought was interesting is that you charge a hall only $666 for the entire year to rent out, and then I'm paying $526 as a single day event with absolutely no wiggle room. So being very detail orientated, I asked for your records of what you had last year at the City of Kitchener, how many temporary retail market licenses were issued under the Freedom of Information Act. And you only issued 49 temporary retail market license, giving the city just over $23,000 in revenue last year. And I fall into it because I have more than 5 vendors selling at my sale. They keep everything they make, so I don't fall into the charity or the not-for-profit licensing because the parents keep all the money. It's not just going to a charity. And it's only held one day within 6 months, so I don't fall into any of the other licenses. Because there was some press over for my September sale, your chair, Scott Davey, got on the radio with CBC-KW on September 9th and on 89.1. Scott stated that a sky-high city fee was never intended to gouge small temporary retail markets and should be reconsidered. The interviewer asked, do you think you're losing business? But you as the City of Kitchener wouldn't really know because my option was basically to walk away, and why would I tell you I've walked away? So I thought it was interesting that the City of Kitchener always refers in your meetings, and even today, your neighboring cities being Cambridge and Waterloo. You always refer to them and what fees they charge so it doesn't pull business away from Kitchener and you don't favor one location over the other. In fact, you were looking at amalgamating in 2010. So City of Hamilton is my home city. It's where I started my mom-to-mom sale, and they amalgamated in 2001, giving them a population and a size that you would have had if you had amalgamated with Cambridge and Waterloo back in 2010. So I thought it was interesting to look at this city as opposed to just Waterloo and Cambridge. I asked the Ancaster Fairgrounds, can you email me everything that you had in 2014 in your hall? And they had 46 retail markets. What you in the city of Kitchener would have charged the full 526. One location had that at the city of Hamilton, and they have a lot more in the city of Hamilton. Does that mean I'm over? No, okay. So being a business or a consumer of the city of Kitchener, it's just like if I was consuming anything else, and it's a pet peeve of mine. When I booked Bingaman's, nobody at Bingaman's said, oh, by the way, you also have to pay to run a sale here $526 to the city of Kitchener. I wouldn't have booked Bingaman's if that had been the case. I wouldn't take an airplane for the same reason if I have to pay a surcharge for fuel. I wouldn't book, I hate on a cell phone company slapped with a connection fee. It's the reason I'm buying a phone. So I feel that's the same way with Kitchener. You've already licensed your hall. Why am I paying again to operate within that same hall that you've already made sure is licensed? There's also a few additional issues with getting a license in Kitchener. I emailed 12 other cities within Ontario to find out you're one of the few cities that actually would charge a small tabled event, like a small 20-table craft sale, a small mom-to-mom sale. You're one of the few that actually has a charge for it. Most cities feel that it's not a licensing matter. Similar cities that have a charge only charge $35, $68, maybe $200. You're the highest of all the cities that I actually asked. But there's also these couple of additional issues. I have to pay for this license in person at City Hall, which would really be something that's going to drive away events from outside your city coming into your city to host an event locally, because who wants to show up from LA and pay your city council on a Friday before their event? I also have to provide a police criminal record check. You're the only city that requires this. And there's still no really good explanation why I have to when I'm renting Bingaman's. Bingaman's is staffed. It's only 4 hours. Everybody there is an adult. Why am I supplying you with a police criminal record check for this license? So I just want to make sure I don't go over. But I wanted the City of Kitchener to, instead of focusing on events as sort of being a threat to your brick and mortar establishments, actually seeing them as the economic generator that they are. Hamilton has, as I said, Ancaster Fairgrounds, we're looking at 46 events just in last year, one location. You're 49 events across your city. You're getting that $23,000. But instead, that location could be hiring staff. Those staff spend it locally. They maintain their structure, because all of that money is used by them to generate further and beautify their location, which attracts more business. You get more people wanting to live in Kitchener, and you should look at more on the rental of Bingaman's or the rental of any location being a positive growth to your city rather than the city fee being your focus. That's about it. I hope I didn't go over too much. I was a little nervous.
No, you did very well.
Okay.
And yes, you were just a little bit over time, but that's not a problem. There are a couple questions from members of committee. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I think you've really highlighted on some key points, and it's a question that needs to be asked of staff, but perhaps a common sense review of this user fee is in order. Now, this is something you've done in other cities as well?
No, I've run the mom sale in other cities. I've never been charged by city. Like the city of Hamilton laughed when I went back and asked them. I've been running that sale since 2010.
One of the slides, you actually outlined some fees that are applicable in some other areas as well.
Yeah.
So were those fees other than Hamilton, City of Hamilton? Or?
So the City of Oakville, for example, and it's really a hodgepodge, so it's really hard to look at individual cities because some will have a fee, like the City of Oakville will charge if my event is impacting the parking lot, a city-owned parking lot in Oakville. But if my event is on a private property, for example, like I gave them a church as an example when I asked the city council there, And they said, no, then there is no fee because you're completely enclosed on private property. And then you have sort of like a Waterloo and Cambridge that also have small fees, but then there's exceptions. And that fee might be something that's charged for both the spring and the fall, so that it's even less. So it's just kind of a little bit all over, depending on the city.
In the region, you've only operated out of Bingaman's here in Kitchener, correct? Okay. How many people participated for this sale?
So it's only 60 tables, but
60
you're only
tables.
looking about 40 to 45 actual sellers because parents tend to book multiple tables. So they'll book
That's
2
fine.
to 4 tables.
How many came in? Did you keep
Oh,
track?
500 to 600. It's just a small.
A single day?
Pardon?
A single day,
oh,
one
yeah,
day?
Yeah, it's just a single day. It's just 4 hours.
500, 600. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandez?
Thanks, Laurie, and thanks for responding to my questions that I sent you. So I have to say I was quite taken aback by your figures here and the information about the great difference. So what would your suggestion be for a situation like this?
Well, I mean, obviously, I would sort of like to see the fee eliminated. I was shocked that there's such a difference between your kind of for-profit and your not-for-profit rate, which is 51 or 52.60, because you raised it, and you're thinking about, I think, raising this fee again this year. I wasn't told there was any sort of discounted rates when I was going back and forth between the committee, the licensing department. So to kind of find that because of the Privacy Act and being able to see that there was this option, but again, their feeling is I don't fall into it. My feeling is, well, I'm not a trade show, so I'm not like your KW Home and Garden Show, which is a 3-day, event. I'm not competing with your local businesses. No business from Toronto wants to trek in for a four-hour sale and then trek back out. It's never anything that happens. So I'd like to see it eliminated. I think it would be interesting to see if Hamilton even charges any event, because not only is there at the Ancaster Fairgrounds, there's also the Carport Center, there's the Downtown Convention Center, and then there's numerous smaller halls. If I rented a Lions Club here in the city of Kitchener and I only could fit 20 tables in for my mom-to-mom sale, I still am over that 5-table limit, so I would still have to pay you $526. So the likelihood of me even having that event and running that Lions Club for it, not going to happen. Mm-hmm. You're kind of killing your smaller halls because the fee is so large. There's no way I could make the money.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that explanation. So you mentioned something about, in your email, I think to me, was about churches, that if churches held your event, for example, can you explain that?
Okay, so during the spring sale, my March sale, actually a mom-to-mom sale was operating in the local church on Ottawa Street. So just, was that south of Bingaman's? And they didn't have the fee, right? Because they're a not-for-profit, they're a church. So here you have a church that's running the exact same sale as I am. We actually were on the exact same day, because I had buyers come from that, oh, your sale is much larger, and your sale has parking. And here I'm paying to rent a facility, which goes on as that economic generator. The church owns that facility, so they don't have to pay for the rental. They don't have to pay for the insurance. It's the church members that are staffing it, and they don't have that penalizing fee on top of it that I do, yet we're the exact same event. They're renting the table to a parent. That parent is selling their items. I'm running the exact same sale, but I'm just happen to be at Bingaman's.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis?
Yes, thanks for coming in, and Laurie and explaining your situation. I guess the question that I'm going to ask is, are you expecting like some sort of decision for this year?
I would love a check.
You would love a check.
A refund, and if at all possible, because I don't make, from the sales, you're only looking at maybe $800 or $900 in profit once you're paying for Bingaman's. Bingaman's is giving me a reduced fee as well because they see us as kind of similar. I'm bringing in business to them because my business is parents. they run the Funworks. They see that as a great knock-on benefit to them. So I would love it if that was the case, because this has been a lot of work and an additional expense to get Kitchener to release the records. It's been something we've been emailing back and forth for quite some time.
Okay, well, you know, I don't discount some of the things that you're saying, and it's probably somewhat accurate, but my concern is if we were to give you a check today, how do we deal with the rest of the others that we've done? Because it's not playing fair. Like, we charge others and we give you a discount because you appear before council.
Well, I'm not sure if you're going to hit the 49. I mean, everybody has the choice to do that. I've just been the one that happens to have driven from Hamilton to do it. I think most people you're not even hearing from, because once the city calls you up and says, we hear about this, we want to check. We also want a criminal record check. Most events wouldn't have the time or the inclination to do it. So an email would go out to vendors and go, sorry, this is canceled. And they take the hit with paying the location and take that as a loss rather than add additional expense to them. I don't know what you did this year. I mean, I got the records and I think you had 32 when I asked for 2015's records at that time. So you might be closing on 40. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to give everybody a check?
Well, I prefer to have a review.
Yeah.
And review our policies before you give out any checks to anyone.
Okay. Councillor Anderson, no keep safe comments for later, please.
Right. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, thank you. I normally don't like to ask delegates questions, but you appear to have become a specialist in this area. Perhaps you can help me. That church example you were giving, did they not pay a fee at all, or did they pay a reduced fee?
I'm sorry, who's
when you were comparing the function in the church did the church, did that group not pay any fee at all?
I don't think they got caught by the city of Kitchener. So I don't think Kitchener actually knew they were operating that mom-to-mom sale sitting just a little bit south of me. And if they did, they fall into your not-for-profit or charity rate, which is last year was $51.10. So this year would be, $52.06.
Okay, but they would have paid.
They would have had to pay under your current thing.
Yeah. Is it fair that you pay any fee at all? Just on the fact that you are competing with our businesses that are here, who pay taxes, is it fair that you pay anything?
It depends if you see the event as benefiting your local brick and mortar businesses more and having that sort of economic benefit throughout Kitchener more than the $51 and the staff time taken to process the $51. I mean, if it was $51 or $52.06, I'm getting confused with what was last year and what was this year's rate. And then on top of it, I have to show up to the city of Kitchener to show my license.
No, you made a lot of good points there. I mean, one of the points that you made, that I've heard so often is, if you're fair to me, you've got to be fair to everybody. That's a ridiculous comment. So anyhow, thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. My apologies for coming late, so perhaps my question has already been answered.
That's right.
I want to know, what's the timeline from the moment that you registered with Bingamans to hold 2 events?
Yeah.
And then, so you held 2 events, and when did you learn about the licensing fee?
March 4th, before the March 14th sale.
So that was before...
That's when the city counciled.
Before both events?
Yeah, and I had already paid for both events. So it was on the table whether or not do I cancel the September event and lose my deposit with Bingamans, or do I try to, by the time the event goes, can I have a chance to debate with the city before my September event? But I ended up not getting into any of your council meetings. This was the earliest one that I could attend.
So, all right. And so you learned about the fee. before your first event.
Yeah.
You had already prepaid for booking the 2 events. But in that time frame from March 4th till today, have you also, had you, or even till the September event, had you considered asking for a refund from Bingaman's before your September event, so that, because they had not done their due diligence and told you about the fee?
Well, there is on Bingaman's has a refund policy where they keep, just like any venue, keep a certain percentage. I mean, I guess I could have, I mean, they were pretty upset when they heard I had to pay it, but I didn't ask for a refund for the event. It's just, I've already booked tables, I've already put some marketing in on the first event, you always market the second event, and you're hoping that it might make enough so that you kind of cover it, but then you realize that it's only going to be forever a 60-table event.
So I appreciate it's frustrating for you, but I would struggle to see us provide retroactively a refund when it's a for-profit
Councillor Marsh,
endeavor.
sorry.
Okay, comments.
Yes,
thanks.
thank you. Councillor Schneider.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davey. I just want to be totally clear. You said this was a mom-to-mom, like almost like a garage sale. Did you have any new retailers or anyone selling new products there?
Yeah, I have usually about 9 to 10 businesses. So
Okay.
like Avon or Tupperware, or I had the, what is it, your Waterloo, University of Waterloo has a baby study.
Okay.
So they came as well.
Okay, so I just wanted to be clear that this was clearly a mom-to-mom or a garage sale type thing, but there were some new retail.
Yeah, there's always a little bit of business.
Thank you. Councillor Singh, I have you in a second time, or question of staff? Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Conkle, for coming in today. Appreciate it.
Yes, so does that mean I can leave for the day, or do I stay to the end, or how does it work?
You do not have to stay by any means.
Okay.
So we're going to discuss probably a whole bunch of other fees, and then we'll discuss yours as well. But
That's later, right?
You can contact staff or any member of council to find out how
Okay,
things.
well, thank you for your time, and please email me if you have any other questions.
Yeah, thank you kindly. Okay, so questions of staff. Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you. Just of the points that have been raised, not sure if staff have had opportunity to comment some of the points about comparison to other municipalities. Can you address on that?
Certainly, I did do some research with some other municipalities, and we fall in line for average. City of Kitchener does compared to others. There are some that are lower, there are some that are higher, but we've looked at it as a comprehensive licensing program, and we've not just done zoning checks. We include lots of other items in our licensing program.
Okay, sorry, before we go any further, Ms. Daniels, correct? I don't think we've met.
Sorry?
Ms. Daniels?
That's me, yes.
Yes, so I'd just like to welcome you. I don't think you've appeared before committee or council before, so welcome. Councillor Singh, please continue.
I want my 30 seconds discounted.
I noted.
No, I won't take that long. So you're saying we're in the middle of the pack, but that's not to say. My concern is, are we looking at it as more, hopefully not a black and white approach? Do we give some considerations depending on the type of event it is, as for the benefit to the community, as well as if it's not necessarily for profit?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the only difference in our fees is the charitable, like we spoke earlier this morning. There's a 10% rate that is charged if it's a charitable organization operating. That's our only current setup for difference in what fees we would charge. And there are municipalities that operate differently. It's a municipal program.
Can you give example of some others that may be operating a little differently, where I'm sure they have fees for profit businesses, if they're organizing an event, but for something like this as an example where it's not a charitable organization, but they're not generating a profit for self. Can you give a reference to or example of another municipality that may look at it differently? Or?
Through the chair, the only one that I am familiar with is there are some municipalities that charge a resident versus a non-resident fee.
Resident versus a non-resident fee?
Correct.
Okay, all right. When was the last time a review was done on this this particular fee structure?
Through the chair, the last review was done in 2005. It is part of our 2016 work plan to do a comprehensive review of the entire licensing program.
Okay, so, and that would include this as well?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I'll make my comments afterwards, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There are 6 people in the queue. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I noticed on the email that you sent us that we are doing zoning, fire, health, police, property permission inspections. My question is, if we have a facility like Binghamton's, and they would have templates of setup for all their shows, so nothing would change really from show to show. They have to keep their door entrances open, fire exits clear. Why would we need to come back every single show to inspect this again?
Through the chair, this is exactly what we would be looking for in our comprehensive review, is things that have changed over the years, practices, procedures, looking for efficiencies, and then coming back and reporting to council on the entire program, what we've been able to discover.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind everyone as well that this questions are for the entire user fees, so if you have any questions, ask them broadly. So please click in. Mayor Verbenovich.
Thank you. And my questions are particularly in regards to this last delegation and the item there. I'm glad to hear that we're seeing the review happening, because that was one of my questions. But in terms of things like the record checks and so on that you're looking at as part of the review, do we have any sense right now, or I mean, are we over-regulating in comparison to other cities?
Through the chair, I believe what we've done is set up a system of what our requirements meet why we intended to have the bylaw in the first place. So if you have a bylaw that's put in place for consumer protection, you have requirements as a part of that, which a police check would be one of those items. So if you're looking at that comprehensive program and the basis of why licenses were issued, we would match what is required with that basis.
Okay. On the particular request of the delegation, and this maybe is more of a legal question. I don't see anyone from legal here. But at what point, if we start, waiving fees potentially, if council were inclined to accede to the request of the delegation, at what point does it potentially start being considered bonusing or not?
Through the chair, you would have to be careful, as you've stated with the Municipal Act bonusing provision, because there are corporations that are licensed under this, and an elimination or reduction in a fee would be considered under that Act provision.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have on that issue right now. I do have some comments in terms of where we go with it.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davey. My question is regarding all the user fees, not dealing with the market situation. It's in particular with the LRT additional fees. I'm just concerned, why are we have to cover these fees, and why is the region not covering these fees?
Mr. Chapman.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what I might suggest as we get into the full schedule is if the council member can indicate perhaps the page number and the line number of the specific fee, that will help staff and council go to that fee. So can you identify the page and the line? Okay. Or are you looking at the narrative only?
Well, the LRT additional fees are item 146.8 to 1475. Like, they're all concerning with LRT.
Some of the explanations on page 1-4, that's where I presume you got it, Councillor Ioannidis. So if you could repeat the question, Councillor Ioannidis, that might...
Well, I'm not understanding why we're going to be charging these fees when, these should have been all implemented during the time of construction, and so I'm just not understanding why are they going to be levied?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, these fees are for future projects that aren't being done as part of the LRT construction. It's if we have to do new connections underneath the LRT tracks. So we typically pay for those services when we do them, whether it's a regional road or a city road. There's just an extra fee that we passed on to the developer or whoever's requesting those connections under the LRT track.
Okay, so it's because of the LRT, though, is the reason why we're going to be charging these extra fees.
Through the chair, yes, the LRT makes construction more complicated around them because there are certain areas where you have to work around other infrastructure that's underneath, and there's an exclusionary zone under the track that you need to avoid.
Okay. All right. I think that's all my questions for the user fees, and I have comments later.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
I wanted to ask a question on that licensing issue first. Can you tell me what is the philosophy? What's our philosophy behind that fee? Is it intended to make revenue for the city, or is it intended to cover the costs that we incur?
Through the chair, it would have been a cost recovery model that would have been implemented back in 2005 with the fee calculations for all licensing matters.
Okay, so it was intended to break even, basically then.
Correct.
Why is there a charge for that? Is there some reason that we could all understand why you even do have a fee for it?
Certainly, through the chair, the licensing program would have looked at, when they established all the fees, we would have looked at time, what the staffing cost to administer the license, and any direct expenditures at the time, which would be our ID programs, our computers programs, and then it would have been a calculation from there for all license matters.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions on the other fees. The one relates to people renting or something and having licensed events. I see on pages, I'm not sure, there's several pages. There are events at our community centers or whatnot, and there are large reductions, minus 25, minus 35%. Are you with me? Is everybody with me?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, what we have found, our experience is that when somebody comes to try to organize a licensed event at one of our community centers, the cost that we charge is prohibitive, and so we're losing business. People just quickly go away and go somewhere else, and so we have a multi-year plan to reduce some of those fees in order to really get back into the business and then hopefully actually attract these folks and generate revenue.
Okay, that's fine. My question really dealt with, as a result of these huge reductions, did we make a lot of revenue from that in the past that we're no longer going to see, or what impact will that have?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we anticipate that by reducing the fees, we'll actually increase revenue because we will actually attract people. Right now, it's a phone call, and when they hear the price, they say, I'm going elsewhere.
Okay, that's fine. So I just wanted to, because it wasn't in line with the 2% and what have you. One other quick question on the ice rentals. I noticed they're going up 3.4%. What kind of grants are we giving to those organizations?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I would remind Council of the new way that we are funding our affiliated ice groups.
Okay, that's answered. So it has no impact on that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock?
Yeah, I'll start with the temporary market, the retail license. I'm just wondering if, I understand that you're doing the comprehensive review in 2016, and I think that that's really good. I'm wondering if there's anything we can do for the 2016 user fee that could assist as we do the review. And I'm just wondering if there's a category that we can create this year that is a garage, I don't know what you would word it, but a garage sale type group that where there's no more than 10 to 15% of retail business there, that we can do a different fee. Is that something that we can look at doing for this year while the review is being done?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that would be a bylaw. I would need a bylaw amendment in order to include a different category, which would not be completed in time. I wouldn't think so.
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, we could report on that for next week. Presumably you could give direction around that. It may just take some time for the bylaw to be implemented, so it wouldn't be done by next Monday, but we would have to look to see if that could be in place for January the 1st.
Okay.
So we could, if that's a direction council wants to go, then we could report back on timing.
Okay, and if we were to do something like that, I can write it up and put it into a motion while we talk. What would, in your opinion, be an appropriate fee? I was thinking more than your not-for-profit group, but not quite as high. I was thinking around the $100 range. Would that be something that you think would be okay, or would you like to see it a little bit higher, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would really, we'd need some council direction on whether or not we keep the same service standards, because the fees are calculated based on what we do and how we do it. So if you're looking at changing the service standards, then that's when I would be able to comment on what the relative fee would be.
Okay. Okay, well, in the interim of the comprehensive review, we may just have to do something this year, and I'll put that in a motion, and council can debate that at the appropriate time. I have one other question on different user fee. It's user fee for the future multi-use trail fee number 1493, which is on page 1-79. I'm just wondering, for new subdivisions, developers are supposed to currently put the multi-use trails or trails in. Is this for anything that doesn't require that, and this is just the fee we're charging for other trails throughout the rest of the city that may not be tied to that development specifically?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, we'll have to look into that and get back to you by email before council.
Okay. I don't just, because there was really only 2 sentences, so I'd appreciate with the new user fee, just a little bit more detail on that. Okay, that's all my questions. I will write that up in a motion.
Thank you. Councillor Yurneski?
Yes, thank you. A few questions here. In regard to the temporary use zoning bylaw fee for temporary uses, do we have many of those, or is that the same thing as an interim use application? And second part of that question is, if you do have $5,000 for temporary use, then you can renew after 3 years with an option for renewal. Do they have to pay another $5,000 again on that? That'd be the equivalent of a full zone change. Which way are we going on that?
Mr. May.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is that no, there are not many of these. This is a small number that staff anticipate will take advantage of this. And yes, if they wanted to do another temporary use in 3 years, they would have to do the same. If I recall, most of the times that this will apply, they wouldn't do that. At that point, they would likely be going to a more permanent use.
What was the last part?
They likely would not be doing 2 temporary uses. If I recall, the potential for these, once they've used up kind of a 3-year term, they would move to a more permanent use.
Okay. And maybe we can explore that a little further after the fact. In regard to marriage licenses, the fees have not been increased. And it indicates here that there may be a decline in the number of licenses sold, but people may not be interested in getting married. I don't think that would be an issue. If you're going to get married, you're going to get married, as opposed to worried about the fee. That's just, is that the reason why it's not being increased? Because competitively to other municipalities, if they don't want to get married in Kitchener, they'll go to Waterloo or something like that?
So the fee is based on our competitors within this particular region, and yes, anybody can go anywhere to get a marriage license. So we're trying to stay on par with the other municipalities within this region.
So if you both parties live in Kitchener, they can get married in Waterloo, as an example.
They don't even have to live in Kitchener. They can live in Toronto and come here for a marriage license. But we try to keep our fee in and around what the other municipalities within this region are charging.
Okay, because I see the fee is $148, so I mean it's not a huge amount, but.
No, but it's on par, so we're trying to not discourage anyone from coming here to Kitchener.
Okay, appreciate that. Further to the questioning on the LRT additional fees, to get a better clarification on that, the new fees that are being charged, this is something that we're not paying. This is, do I understand it, that once the LRT system is built and there's a development happening along the system, and then you need to make a connection, you've got to go underneath the services in the LRT. This is what the fee is for?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. And the last question I have dealing with the multi-use trail, there's a fee being charged for development applications on putting this. Isn't this like double charging? Because, I mean, wouldn't they have already provided land for as part of park dedication? and now you're charging him another fee?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, I don't have enough details on that line item. I'll have to include that in the email response that will come back.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock asked a question about that as well, so that will come as Mr. Reedman indicated. He'll get back to us by around noon on that item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, one moment here. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. I just have a question around the comment about bonusing. Can I have a better explanation about how that relates to the delegation that we were here?
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, the Municipal Act precludes municipalities from providing a reduction or the elimination of a fee or a charge to a commercial enterprise that doesn't apply across the board or through a community improvement plan. So it precludes you from, on a one-off basis, making concessions on fees to commercial enterprises. My understanding is that this application was made through a corporate entity, and as a result, you would not be able to, per that section of the Act, grant a one-time reduction, exemption, or refund to this applicant.
Okay, because they're a corporation. If they were a non-for-profit?
That's correct. If they were an unincorporated resident, if they were a not-for-profit, a charity, an institution, that section would not apply. Okay,
thanks. I have a question on a couple of other pages. On page 130, the 589, the adult standard, this is regarding disinterment of bodies. There's a new fee here for $3,955. I mean, for a new fee, I find this exorbitant. Can somebody help me understand why we're implementing a new fee at this high of a level? When I look at some of the other ones, they're certainly not that high, and even the adult standard
Mr. May?
is not that high.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is one of the more complex services that is provided at the cemetery, and so the cost is simply to reflect the fact that more work is required in order to do this work.
Okay, maybe you and I need to have a discussion offline about that, because I think it's a little bit challenging to discuss that publicly at this time. The other one I had was related to licensing on 1144 on page 1-63. It's regarded to adult entertainment parlors, amusement places, amusement arcades. So I see a real variety of 1.9, 1.82, 2.16 percentage increases. Why wouldn't we have a straight across the board increase for all of those fees?
Mr. Haggie.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, it's just to keep the dollar amount at an even dollar. You'll notice that they all are $411, $750, and no cents. So it's just the way the math works.
I see.
They're basically 2%, but just to keep it at a round dollar amount.
Okay. So just easier for bookkeeping and such.
Yeah, instead of charging somebody $411 and 5 cents to get a straight 2% increase, it's $411.
Okay, all right. My other question is on the stormwater management quality fee, $13.85. And I just wanted to understand, this is quite a jump, but I'm expect that this is developer pays. It's a 25% jump.
Mr. Reedman.
Through the chair, this was identified in the stormwater management policy, so this is a policy direction for the increase. So I'd have to look into whether that applies to whether it's from the developer or it's the monthly fee.
Mr. Wilmer?
Through the chair, it's my understanding this is a developer fee. When they're not providing quality control on their own site, they do the cash in lieu, and we provide the quality control off-site.
Okay, so it's our staff that's going, if they don't provide it on their site, and how, is this an annual fee that's being charged, or is it a one-time fee?
Through the chair, it's a one-time fee paid at the time of development.
Okay, all right. I think that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, one quick question. At the Victoria Park Pavilion, is there a charity rate existing at the moment?
Seeing Mr. Regier?
Yeah, through you, Chair Davey, I'll need to get back to you on that as well. I'll get Jeff to respond regarding the Victoria Park Pavilion.
Thank you.
Okay, I think everyone that's in the queue has already asked questions once. Mr. Reedman, do you have a comment? Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, I've received an email clarification regarding trails, so I can answer that now.
Please.
So if a development plan includes a trail and for some reason it is not constructed by the developer, the money is given to the city, which is the Parks Department. So it's only if a trail is included in a site plan, but is not installed as part of that site plan. So we take the money in that instance.
Very good. Councillor Galloway-Seelock, does that answer your question? I'll give you an opportunity to retort.
Sorry. Do we not do that now?
Based on the inclusion in here,
I guess it's
guess
hard
that
for
we
me
don't do it
to
now.
ask questions. Maybe we can just get a little bit more information about that for the next. I don't need it for today. I appreciate that you've come back with more information. I just think that even if I can have some dialogue with the staff who's recommending this fee, that might be good.
Thank you. Okay, and again, before going back through, I'll just ask a couple questions, if I could, again, about the market, the retail market license fee. Councillor Galloway-Seelock indicated bringing forward a motion, and there's a question about level of service. In the email that you sent us ahead of time, are there any, I guess the City of Waterloo only charges a planning fee and Cambridge has planning and fire, whereas we have police and a couple others. Are there any specific reasons or concerns that you would have if the motion were to be that we only have planning or only planning and fire as the service level?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe in a comprehensive program that we look at why we would be looking at having those licenses in the first place. So I would support having the inspections required for the different licenses, and really we would need justification if we were going to remove any of them as to what is still covered. So that is part of the comprehensive review plan, is to make sure that if we are asking for an item because of consumer protection, that there isn't something else that would replace that, and vice versa. Same as for health and safety. If we require fire inspection, make sure that those principles behind those reasons stay intact if we look at removing something from the program.
Okay. Is there any system in place or any examples we've had in the past where once a license is issued and they essentially jump through all the hoops of fire and police background check, etc., that's not required in subsequent years if it's the exact same organization?
Through you, Mr. Chair, specifically for this applicant, the police clearance would have only been required once, so we would have only done that as part of her core package when she first applied, and that's also part of what we need to look at for the comprehensive review, is if they have a second event or an additional event in the city, do we ask for different things? Do we ask for additional? And that's part of what the program needs to be reviewed for.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll go back through. Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you. I had a question on it's page 1-67, item number 1256, this tax certificate. This is, I think, additional levy that's being added on top, or a fee increase of $20 from our normal $60 for the certificate fee. Is that correct, or that would be on top of the $60 fee?
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, no, that would be the only charge. It would not be in addition to the $60 fee.
How often do we get these requests, really? Like, that has to be within the 24-hour as opposed to normally just more well in advance?
I believe it's increasing. We've seen an upsurge in the request for tax certificates, and so I think increasingly we have realtors and law offices calling us asking for an expedited tax certificate, and we think it's reasonable that if they're going to jump the queue, as in the case of a passport application, that there should be a premium charge for that.
Typically, I would assume it would be law firms that would be more contacting for these certificates, especially before closing requirements. Do we have contact info of all the law firms that we could send out a communique letting them know that this is now the increase? so that they're aware that if they send in more closer to date, that they're going to incur additional fee. Again, it's not the law firm that pays, it's the client.
So if I can, let me go back and talk to revenue staff about what communication they've had with the legal community around this fee. As you note, there is no increase on the base fee this year, and so nothing's changed for them, but this is really an opportunity if they want an expedited...
Yeah, it is an extra $20, but I think it's fair for us to somehow communicate that back. If you could have that information prior to council meeting, before this is ratified, that would be helpful.
I'll follow up.
The next question is for stormwater as well. For 1-75, this is a new fee. This is, again, this has been consulted with the development community. This is not something that we're just added on ourselves and then waiting for feedback, or what kind of review process did that go through?
Mr. Reedman? Through the chair, all development fees went to the Home Builders Association for review.
Did we receive any comments?
We received feedback, but nothing major.
Okay, all right. And same thing for inspection fee, which is, I think, 1478, item number 1478. It's for third or consecutive inspection fees, or re-inspection fees. Like, my concern is, again, we are still trying to spur and encourage development in our community. I think we're not there yet, and we don't want to
Councillor Singh, questions only, please.
It's a preamble. Okay, all right. Are we making it more difficult? Is that better?
Better. Mr. Wilmer.
To be blunt, yes, we are. There should be no reason why our staff need to go out and inspect the same thing 3 times. We're not their project manager. When we start to become their project manager, we start to look for ways to discourage that behavior.
Is that happening quite frequent into the third inspection?
Yes, it is. That's the only reason why we would take this, I think, rather extreme step of implementing this kind of fee.
Have you looked at it internally, that we're properly advising the project manager as to what the deficiencies are, in fact, so that it's not on our own doing as well? It's a two-way thing?
Yes, certainly this is two-way. We go out at the developer's request. And so they've requested that we go out and do a final inspection.
What mechanism would be put in place to ensure that it's not the lacking of the inspector or not appropriate communication, or whatever the input that was required that added to the additional inspection thereafter? Is there any way someone could reappeal? Because it could be on fault of our inspector as well, that they didn't provide enough information. It's a hefty fee, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, certainly through the chair, if a developer feels that they're unreasonably being affected by this fee, they would escalate that to a more senior manager in the department. We would investigate it and find out whether the staff person is being reasonable. So those do happen from time to time in any case, but I think that, as Mr. Reedman has indicated, we've discussed these fees with the Home Builders Association. They understand that if most of them are working appropriately and some are so-called bad actors, that it's reasonable for us to take measures to improve the overall efficiency of the system.
The notice that we would send out for the cost of, or the fee of the third inspection, would it denote the fact that, yes, they can appeal if they feel they're being charged unfairly?
Through the chair, no, I wouldn't suggest that is necessary. It's not technically an appeal. It's with any aspect of business. If any of our customers feels that they're being treated with unfairly, it's reasonable for them to want to escalate that. But we wouldn't invite appeals.
Yeah, we will. But we should also ensure that people know their privileges as well, right? So,
Councillor Singh, your time's expired.
Okay. I had one quick one. Do you mind?
One last one?
Yes. Certainly. It's actually the last one, too. Community programs, 246-252 and 417 to 434. We have small fees being added. I don't have a major question. I'm just saying, where do we lie in compare? I know we're doing a comprehensive review as well, but do we know when, for community programming, in comparison to our other neighboring municipalities, where do we sit on our fees?
Mr. May?
Through you, Mr. Chair, for the most part, the fees that the councillor is referencing are not about whether or not we're competitive with other facilities. It's whether or not community groups can afford the rates that we're setting. And I think the comprehensive review will point to council to say, in fact, some of our fees are too high, and you've already started to see us reduce some of those. And over time, I think we'll continue to do that.
Perfect. No, that's really what I wanted to see, that ensuring that we're getting that feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. One last question on the temporary markets. In order to reduce fees, could an annual one-time inspection approval for standardized show setups for places like Bingaman's or the Odd, could that suffice for all the shows as long as they follow those standardized setups that year?
Through the chair, that's exactly what we'd be looking for in the comprehensive review is can we create a standard program where you have facilities that are rented on an ongoing basis, Bingaman's, the Odd, those examples that you provided, can we look at, as long as the operator is staying with that standardized setup, is there a change in how our process handles that?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davey, and I'm glad Hans just walked in because it's back to the LRT questions. And my concern here is this may make sense to a project that may be a high rise, but what my concern is, and I've seen it happen with my mother-in-law's place. You know, they had low water pressure, and then they had to redo their pipes and stuff. And there's still a lot of homes on this route, like to charge $7,500 for something like that for a
Councillor,
small.
and I just questions. Get to the.
It seems exuberant. So I want to understand why these are going to be here, or is it going to be some form of leniency towards that? Because
Mr. Gross.
Through the chair, the fees are estimated fees, estimated by our staff in conjunction with the region on what it would take to install a service under the LRT lines to a property. The property owner has the option to either do it themselves or have the municipality do it. In most cases, the developer chooses to do it himself, or the property owner chooses to do it himself. That isn't always the case with water, but generally speaking, a developer or a property owner will hire a contractor. What we do is we estimate the value of that work based on these fees. We hold 60% of those fees as a guarantee that the work will be properly done. Once the work is done, then we release all except 10%, which is the administration fee for that work.
Okay, so to get what my understanding is, so let's say someone wanted to have a new connection. We as staff can do that for a resident and then charge that? Is that what you're trying to say? Instead of having a private contractor do that?
What we would do is we would estimate the cost of the work. Now, it gets a little bit complicated simply because our water utility likes to do their own connections, whereas the sanitary and the storm crews don't have that capability anymore. They've given that up. They've given that to the private sector to do. The water is a pressurized system, which is more tricky, more sensitive to work with, and you need special licenses for that. So if a homeowner comes in and wants a sanitary, let's say they're tearing down a house, building a new house, and they want a new sanitary, a new storm, and a new water. The property owner would have to come in and get a permit, and that permit includes estimating the cost of that work based on these fees. Then they would have to provide a 60% certified check or some form of surety, and they would go and they would get their own contractor to do the work. Now, if our water utility wishes to do the work because, let's say it's a tricky situation or they're uncomfortable with the area, with what's being done, they would prefer to do it themselves, then the cost of the water service is then provided to the water utility. That then is the cost of the work, the fixed fee.
Okay.
Does that...
Well, I think my concern is valid then, basically, because if a homeowner was to want to do that, they're going to have these fees charged on top of what they're going to charge a contractor. So,
not all the fees. They would be given back all except 10%.
But my point is, you're going to be holding it in lieu or whatever it is for them. It's a significant amount of dollars just to have that type of money being held by the city. And how long will we be holding on to it?
Typically we hold on to 60%, and the 60% is held until the work is done and inspected, and then it's released. Okay. Which is a normal turn of events for other works as well.
Okay, I may have some other items later to deal with this. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
I have a couple of questions. I'd like to go back to the marriage license fees. It was my understanding that we establish our fees based upon the amount of work that's required. They're really a break-even proposition. We don't have these fees just to make money. So we know that our costs are going to go up by 2%. Why would we not increase our cost for marriage licenses by the 2%, regardless of what everyone else is doing? I guess the follow-up question I would ask is, how come our costs are higher than what the other jurisdictions have?
I'll answer the last question first, so through you, Mr. Chair. Our costs are on par with the other municipalities within this area, and so that's why we want to keep it the same. In terms of cost recovery, that is the basis upon which the fees were originally established, and then would have increased accordingly throughout the years by 2%. We've been holding the line on marriage licenses because in the past we did see that there was a drop in the number of licenses that we were issuing when our fees were a little bit higher than other municipalities within this area.
But why do we care? It's a break-even thing. We don't care if our sales go down there because we don't have to do the work. And I have to go back. We know our costs are going up 2%. Why aren't our fees going up too? It's not an area. It's not. We don't have lost leaders and marriage licenses or what have you.
So, Councillor Gazzola, the question is, what do we stand to lose by issuing fewer marriage licenses? Is that the question?
Well, my original question was, why are we not increasing that marriage license fees?
Well, that's been answered, to stay in line.
Yeah, but to stay in, then it's not a question of recouping our costs. What is it? Are we in a competitive business, or are we there to recoup our costs? It's a philosophical thing. I'll leave it, okay? Because I'll follow up with my next question. And that I keep hearing about a comprehensive review. What is this comprehensive review we're talking about? At first, I thought it was just to do with these market fees, but is it to do with everything? Well, I've heard the word comprehensive review. What is it?
Mr. Chapman.
As Ms. Daniels indicated, it's been 10 years since we've looked at our business licensing fees, and so the comprehensive review is to look at all of the categories of business licensing.
Okay, so that's fine. So it's just that one area that we're going to look at.
Correct.
That's fine. My other question in that is that in our business plan? Is that in your business plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that is part of my 2016 work plan.
Fine, thank you.
Mayor Verbenovich?
Well, thanks. And my question was actually on this comprehensive review piece as well. And I'm wondering, have we as a committee, I don't recall, given any or had an opportunity to have any discussion around the scope of the review and what that would look like going forward, or is the intention to bring that forward before the review actually takes place?
Mr. Chapman?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I know the intention was to come back to a strategic session in the summertime, and that would be before we finalize decisions. If the committee has an interest in seeing the terms of reference for that before it goes ahead, that would not be inappropriate, and we can take that direction today and certainly build that into the work plan.
Okay, well, at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair, I would actually like to give some direction in that regard, because I think it is something that that should come back. So if you can come back to me at the appropriate time for that.
I will do that. Councillor Gazzola, you forgot a question?
Well, in view of the answer I received, I would like an answer on my question on the principle behind our marriage license fees, for example, because the comprehensive review is limited as it should be. So that's another area.
Mr. Chapman on that?
Through the chair, my recollection is that for a time, our marriage license fee was well below the market average, and as a budget reduction strategy, when we were looking for significant budget cuts, one of the options was to increase that, and there was a fairly dramatic increase applied to it. I think what we saw is that it did have an impact on volume, and that as we increased dramatically, others have held the line or stayed fairly flat. So I think you're correct. The principle is cost recovery. We're satisfied that we're recovering our costs. Is there a margin of error on this one greater than 2%? Certainly there is. And so I think we're comfortable this reflects a reasonable cost for that license. We're covering our costs. We're consistent with the market. There's a price sensitivity. So let's hold it where it is.
Okay, there are no further questions, so we'll get into some motions, starting with Councillor Galloway-Selak, who indicated.
I wrote it out. Basically, it's just to ask staff to come back with a little bit of information with regards to the temporary retail. I don't know if I worded it exactly right, but license fee. Like I was asking in my questions, that they look at a separate license fee for 2016 for garage sale type events where no more than 15% of the no more than 15% of new goods businesses are participating in the event. So it really does focus around that garage sale type. Staff report back on the impacts of a $100 fee for this for 2016, and then this is just I want to be clear that it's a one-time for 2016 as the comprehensive review is happening, not only for us but also for people who may be paying this fee in 2016, that it's one time in order for the comprehensive review to be completed in 2016. Does staff have any questions about the way I've worded that? I tried my best.
Yeah, so any concerns from staff, I guess, at this point? Mr. Chapman.
Just to clarify, when you say staff look into, are you saying really between now and council report back on these issues so that you can formalize a decision when you approve the fee schedule? And if so, really we can respond to those issues and questions for next week.
Right, yes, okay. And because there was some discussion around whether or not the bylaw, what we would have to do in order to do the bylaw. So all that kind of stuff, if you could bring that back so we can make that decision.
And were you moving the main recommendation as well?
Sure.
Perfect. And before we get to, there's other people in the queue, but Mayor Rabinovich, do you want to raise your...
Sure, well, thank you. Basically, and I don't know if you want to take if you want us to vote on this or not, but or if staff feel we need to, but the direction would be that staff bring back a report as to the scope of the licensing review, and that we actually give some direction around broad parameters. So, for example, if as part of that report that staff would bring back. So, for example, if our presumption is to have 50% cost recovery or 70% or 80%, I think that's part of the general direction we should give before they start this. I think the other part that's important from my perspective is that the review would not only look at it from a licensing or a regulatory lens, but would also look at it from a customer lens. So whether that lens is a individual citizen doing business and needing a license, or whether it's a business or company, I think it's important that be part of it, including obviously some sort of consultation process with the business community, whether that's through the chamber or other appropriate organizations, as well as the public would need to be part of it as well, from my perspective. So that's the kind of stuff I would like to see come back in a report from staff.
So quickly, a head nod or a shake would be appropriate. Does staff want a motion of council for this, or is this something that they would do anyway? Mr. Chapman.
Assuming that reflects a consensus on the part of council, we can build that into the work plan. That's no issue.
I think it's safe to assume that it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Ioannidis, we're in comments.
Yeah, I want to put forward I don't know whether it's a deferral or until on items 1470, 1471, 1472, 1474, and 1475. And the reason why I'm looking at a deferral for those portions is I would like to see like a tiered system when it comes to providing these fees. That's I don't want to comment because it's not my comment time.
No, you can comment as well. But
okay,
sorry,
comment.
so just to clarify though, the numbers were 1470 to 1475.
Basically, yeah. Yeah, and I just don't want to put any unduly cost when it comes to someone, a resident that's looking to rebuild their house or whatever, because they're on the LRT line now, they're going to get penalized, and
so yeah. So my suggestion would be you can either ask staff look at it and come back with options, or you can just ask that be voted on separately and you can vote against it. I'm not sure what your
I want to see options. I don't want to vote on this today. I just want to see how this, if it can work, maybe it might not be.
Okay. So could you repeat the direction to staff that you're looking for?
To look at options for a state tiering this that's applicable to non-developers, basically, or I don't know how else to classify ma and pa individuals working on their own house, or
okay, and that would be a deferral of those items then.
Yes.
To council. Okay. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I just want to comment on this addition before us. Okay. I'd like to have you deal with it separately. Lately we seem to be too quickly making changes. If we're going to have a comprehensive review, I would like to see us do the review. It's slated to be done. Let's do it before we jump quickly, before we have all the facts, into making changes. I've seen that happening too often anymore, that we make I don't want to say the word, but we make these quick decisions. So I'd like, when you deal with this, to have a recorded vote, and I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh.
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, just one, yeah. The other part of it, the reason, to me, it's not an earth-shaking event. It's not something that has a tremendous impact on our community, so that we have to make a decision quickly on it. Sorry.
Thank you. And Councillor Singh?
Yeah, quickly I make my comments and point something out as well. For items from 1469, or for the sanitary and stormwater connection along the LRT route, if that can be voted on separately, obviously I think it will, as I think I would have a pecuniary interest, as my parents and I have property along the LRT route and may be applicable to ourselves. So because that's a conflict, if it can vote to be separately. The other thing I have I wanted to quickly comment on is for the engineering inspection fee for 1478. I think I stand firm on, if we are getting a lot of third inspections, I think we have to look at it internally as well before we just pass on the fee to our prospective developers or those that are trying to reconstruct in our city. Perhaps we have to have a review on how we're conducting our inspections and why is there need for third or fourth inspections. My quick amendment, if it's possible, would be that it not be for the third inspection, that it be fourth. simply, and at the same time, allowing an opportunity for staff to hopefully make improvements in our inspection process to ensure that there is a clear communication going back to the property owner when the inspections are done. So it would be just not applicable to the third inspection, but fourth, and hopefully that would allow time into 2016 when this comprehensive review takes place, that could be incorporated as well. That will give us time, going back to our engineering department, seeing why these additional inspections are required, and if still staff feel confident that our process is clear and it should require a fee for the third inspection.
Sorry, could you repeat the item number?
1478. So simply the change is that it not be applied for the third inspection until as part of the comprehensive review takes place.
And as part of the comprehensive
That wouldn't be a part of the Are we not looking at all user fees, or?
I think it's just licensing fees, so it's not part of that.
Then until next year, it would be so that giving staff an opportunity to look at our internal inspection process.
Okay, sorry. So just for clarity, could you repeat the motion?
I can write it down, but it's clearly that the inspection fee be not applicable for the third inspection. I would maintain the staff recommendation for the fourth, and also giving direction to staff to look and review our inspection process to see why there is so many requests for third or fourth inspections taking place.
Why third and fourth? Okay, so just trying to keep track here. Okay, we will take that separately as well. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. Just listening to some of the comments and questions today, just address it, going first to this temporary retail market. I heard Mr. May saying that one of the reasons we're reducing the fees at the community centre was because we're trying to attract those small events or celebrations. Isn't that kind of the same sort of thing as what the delegation was talking about? I mean, these are small entrepreneurs who are trying to bring business into our community, and if we continue to penalize them with high licensing fees, I think we're pushing them to other cities. So I think we have to keep that in mind, and I do think this $100 fee might be a good way to bridge between what we've charged and what we're looking at when we review. My questions around the I didn't ask a question around the multi-use pathway, but I think in the past we've always struggled to put paths and trails in behind existing houses. So what I understand planning has been doing is making sure that those go in at the onset. I think if the developer industry is not willing to do that, then we need to charge them. We need to find a way to take back some of that cost. And not only does that come with cost for the work, but it also comes for cost with planning and parks and staff meeting with the residents after the fact. So I certainly think that we have to have some kind of a payback charge if the development industry doesn't follow through with a commitment that we are trying to hold them to. The other comment I have was related to 1478 that Councillor Singh was talking about. Maybe because I've been seeing an awful lot of new development happening in my area. I've been speaking to our building inspectors and some of our engineering staff, and they are going out time and time and time again. And I think that's wasting our time, our staff's time. If the developer or the person who's doing the work is not following through with the appropriate inspections, then our staff time is valuable. And I don't think we should be I don't even think we should be waiting till the third time that we go back. I certainly wouldn't support anything longer than a third time. So I understand we're voting on that separately?
We will be.
Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Galway-Seelock.
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to comment with regards to the future multi-use trail. I'm all for the fee. I just want to better understand what it's for and why we need to implement it. Because again, it's my understanding that most of the trails should be going in now in the first phase of development, and therefore developers should be doing it. But in the event that they're not, and then my other question that I really want answered is whether this is all developers, whether it's greenfield, brownfield, infill, just so that we can fully understand that. It looks like Hans may have some answers to that.
Mr. Gross?
Through the chair, if any development shows a multi-use trail within that development, there are times when that trail is not necessarily constructed at that time. It may wait until there may be more consecutive developers before the trail is actually extended. With that being the case, what this provides is a consistent cost instead of a negotiated cost at the time that trail is deferred. So what we're doing is we're saying up front to all developers, this is the cost of the trail this year. If for any reason we're not going to install it as part of this development, let's say we wait until 2 others are in place so we can get a consistent trail done, this is the money that you would provide to the Parks Fund for building that trail at that time. And all it does is it eliminates negotiation for cost of the trail, looking at low tender for cost of the trail. It establishes an above-board consistent cost.
And will that include the, so if it's not planned to be done for 5 years, will it include, is there room for like inflation in this fee, where if it's going to be 5 years and the fee would be this much this year, would we work that in? I know that you're saying you want to be consistent, but is there the ability to do that within this fee?
The fee typically is paid at the time of registration.
Okay.
And while there would be no inflationary amount applied, it is put into a fund which I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, collects interest. And that would be the amount that would be available.
My concern is I want to make sure that we're made whole at the end of the day, that's all. So if that fee, and you believe that fee is going to cover it, then
this is our best
okay.
Way of trying to make it even and above board for all developers, and to try to get the money in place for that work.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for the allowing those questions during comments.
Thank you. Councillor Singh, very quickly, please. I don't want to go around again.
Yeah, just a clarification, actually. So for the engineering inspection fee, when it comes to a third inspection fee, is that inspection takes place, resident is notified of the deficiencies, and then a re-inspection would be taken, and then there would be a third? Is that what the third is referring to, or it's after the first initial, once the deficiencies are noted to the property owner, and then second, and then third? I'm sorry, just clarification how that the process is.
Mr. Gross?
Through the chair, the first comment I would make is that we've taken this as we take all user fees to the home builders, and the home builders are represented there by the home builders as well as consultants. And on this particular fee, they were unanimous in the support, simply because they don't want to be wasting our time in going out and re-inspecting things that have not been changed. To answer the question directly, the work is done. We are asked to come out to do an inspection, to make a deficiency list, and that deficiency list is given to the contractor developer to do. When we are called the second time, we are assuming that all of that work, all of that deficient work that was recognized, has been satisfactorily completed. And I don't believe that that's an unreasonable expectation. So we should be done at that point. We should no longer have to go out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was just looking for clarification.
We have found that several times, more than several, many times, the work hasn't been touched. We're inspecting the same stuff again. So that is why we've asked for, if we have to go out the third time, we want to be paid for it because we don't have that built into our costs.
Okay, but it is a second reinspection after the deficiencies have been outlined.
That is correct.
So we need to ensure that we are articulating that properly when it's saying third. When I saw that, I was assuming that, obviously it's requiring a third reinspection of the initial deficiency list. So
that's correct.
I'll take the comments that staff have said that the development community has acknowledged that this is fair, and I still think we need to internally look at our process and seeing if we can clarify that so we can reduce the necessity of that third inspection so that it's not unnecessarily unfairly added to the cost to the developer. But I'll remove my motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that concludes. I will comment very briefly. I will support Councillor Galloway-Seelock's motion. I think it's appropriate because, the reality is that we have a much higher, I guess you could say, level of service in terms of our checks and balances, but the reality is our neighboring municipalities do not have those checks and balances, and I think in the end we're pushing business away from the city, so I think this is a good short-term solution, and it is subject, as Councillor Galloway-Seelock pointed out, to the comprehensive review, which is the preferred method to deal with all of these things. So on that, we will actually take this motion before us first, and Councillor Gazzola has asked for a recorded vote. We'll take that after. Those in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. We will now deal with the deferral as put forth by Councillor Ioannidis, with the request to work with staff in some sort of tiering structure for non-developers, and that is for items 1470 to 1475, and I would also note in those items Councillor Singh has declared a conflict. So we're voting on the deferral to council. And that is not a recorded vote, so those in favor? And opposed? That carries. And the other two items Councillor Singh has a conflict on will take separately, and that's 1468 and 1469. Those in favor? And opposed? That carries. And the balance of the report is moved by Councillor Galloway-Seelock. Those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Very good, thank you. We'll move on to item number 2, the support for downtown businesses during light rail transit construction. There is no presentation for this item, but we do have a delegation. Ms. Yetzi from the Downtown BIA. And she stepped out. We're going to see if we can find her. Ms. Yetzi, perfect timing. We're ready for you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Council, and through the Chair. Before we address the options that have been recommended in this report, I would like to speak to the reasons I approached the City initially back in August of this year and why we are asking to continue and expand on the offering for parking support in downtown Kitchener. There is a significant shift in traffic patterns due to the construction of light rail transit, and this has resulted in reduced revenue for the businesses of downtown Kitchener. And it's not just with the businesses on Charles Street, although they have been impacted the most during this first phase of construction. All the businesses in the core are experiencing a downturn in foot traffic, and of course this equates to losses on their bottom line. Most of the businesses downtown are sole proprietorships, and losses of 10, 20, and 30% could result in more closures. At the BIA Town Hall in September, I presented my recommendations to the membership for proposed spending in 2016. In that presentation, I conveyed that someday the bulldozers will pull out and the roads will be paved, and we will have a very nice train bringing people in and out of the core and bringing more people to their businesses. So while that's a great message for better days ahead, our businesses do have to survive over the next 2 years. There have been delays in the LRT construction project, and the unexpected turns that come with a project of this magnitude will have had serious impacts on small business operators. Charles Street vendors have already experienced these delays, and it has impacted their sustainability. I also want to mention that I do understand that the City of Kitchener Parking Department operates as an enterprise with a strategy that will make our garages sustainable long into the future, and that there are costs associated with long-term maintenance of such structures. So I realize that free parking on all lots and garages throughout the core is not sustainable to our community. This report is recommending the use of 3 garages subject to availability that are not being fully utilized today, as well as the extension of free parking on surface lots to start earlier at 5 p.m. versus 6 p.m. I believe it is fair to say that the general public would not necessarily understand or be aware that Kitchener parking structures are different and more sustainable than our other surrounding cities. But from an optics perspective, parking is free elsewhere, but they have to pay in Kitchener. We want to send the message that we are making it as easy as we can for them to get here and stay and shop and eat. And offering of free parking, even in limited locations, is going to send that message. It will need to be promoted through advertising. I would like to point out that we have, for the past 3 months, provided free parking for 2 hours at the Benton Street Garage that was provided by the City of Kitchener. We have had very positive feedback from business members whose patrons use these passes. This pilot project started with an understanding that the BIA ambassadors would be on the street handing out 2-hour free parking passes to the Benton Street Garage, and downtown businesses receive these passes weekly based on the usage from our ambassadors. Should Council approve the recommendations in this parking report, the BIA will be committed to promoting, advertising, and distributing the passes through, first, an annual spend of $30,000 for additional ambassadors outside of our summer students to work throughout the construction projects to direct foot traffic, ensure that businesses have the parking passes, hand out the parking passes on the street, and circulate parking maps. And secondly, by spending a minimum of $25,000 in direct marketing to promote the support of free parking for Ion Construction through signage and advertising. These BIA commitments will continue to the end of the LRT construction project should Council agree with the recommendations in this report. Further, I would like to bring... Am I up?
No, you have...
Okay, thank you. Further, I would like to bring to your attention just some highlights regarding beautification spending from the BIA budget. I want to assure you that the BIA is dedicated to shifting our spending during the construction phase to assist in making downtown Kitchener look its best. First highlight, in 2015, the BIA made a $50,000 contribution to the city for additional flowers and a project to enhance the marble containers along King Street. In 2016, we will match and make another $50,000 contribution back. Secondly, the BIA spent $30,000 this past month for the colorful wrapping of intersection poles downtown and traffic boxes that will defer graffiti. This project will continue into 2016 with 2 additional intersections, and the 8 traffic boxes will continue when weather permits. 3, the BIA is now working with a visual merchandising department of Conestoga College to set up a program that will assist business owners in making their storefronts look their best. Further, the BIA funded the decorating of 3 empty locations downtown Kitchener in September. This December, for the Christkindl Market, the BIA has invested $55,000 in additional huts that will allow the festival to grow and extend outside of City Hall onto King Street. The budget has allowed $30,000 in 2016 for street sweeping and additional street washing. And the BIA will create a $30,000 project in 2016 to enhance the streetscape by assisting restaurants in developing attractive patios downtown. I trust this list of beautification spending on downtown Kitchener sends...
Oh, pardon me. Turn this back on here.
Back? Thank you.
If you could please wrap up, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. I trust this sends the message to Council that the members of the BIA are committed to allocating funds from our budget to improve our appearance during LRT construction. Looking nice is important, but making it a great experience for shopping and eating with some choice for free parking will go a very long way. Today we are asking that Council would approve the support of some of the free parking outlined in the report. I thank you for this opportunity to speak to you and happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Yetzi, and there are questions, starting with Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Linda, for coming in and speaking to this topic. I want to know, what is your preferred option and why?
Okay, through the chair, the preferred options would be, they're underlined in your report, so you'll see that there's an underline for option 2B, option 3C, and option 4. Those are the ones that are underlined. So I will address each one. 2B is to extend weekday and Saturday evening parking in downtown surface lots. So right now you can go to a surface lot and at 6 o'clock there's free parking. We are really trying to get the evening and nightlife downtown going a little bit further. We do hear feedback. People feel that they'd like to come down at 5, maybe to do some shopping, maybe to go out and eat. I think that 1 hour would make a big difference in terms of sending the message that parking starts free at 5 o'clock. Option 3C is 2 hours free Saturday parking in City Hall, Duke, Ontario, and Charles and Benton. So this would mean that today in those parking garages, they are paying for those first 2 hours. If you approved this report on a Saturday, they would have 3 garages to choose from. It's a great day. Again, we're trying to promote more shopping downtown, the market, and more use of our restaurants. So those first 2 hours, we're not asking for the whole day. We're just trying to be a little bit more competitive with the other cities. So on Saturday, they'd have the first 2 hours for free. And option 4 is to continue the existing pilot that we started in August. We were very careful on how we handed out the OTRs. We didn't give a business 100 or 200 free passes for 2 hours. The ambassadors would regularly visit each business, ask them how it was going, what the feedback was, how many they've used. And we would find often that they'd ask for maybe 10 or 20 more.
Okay, thank you. So some of these options do include the continued use of those passes, and some of them do not. Do you see any downside to continuing to use the passes versus or a downside to the opposite, to not having passes, just having free parking for everybody?
I think one of the reasons that in terms of the conversations that I had with Paul McCormick regarding setting it up this way, there is a benefit to having those passes. I believe I know it can be measured, so it's more of he can see the OTRs coming back, and that's how we were able to come up with that figure to see how much usage we did in the first 3 months. I think giving out the passes is a nice gesture on the part of a business owner.
Okay, so you don't see it as a hampering of business owners to, remember to give the passes out and that type of thing to their customers? No,
it's been really well communicated.
And does it require that, do the business owners require that their clients actually spend money in their establishments before they get the passes, or they can just browse?
They can just randomly give them out to people that are in the store. And the ambassadors are also on the street, and they're handing them out to people as well. There would be an increased usage if it was promoted more. So because this was a pilot program, we would engage in more advertising that, hey, look, downtown Kitchener now has 2 hour free parking in 3 garages.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Thanks, Linda. And some of your options are things that I've kind of mentioned in the past. I know that it will reduce the city's revenue, but I think overall it does
Comments,
offer.
Councillor Fernandez.
No, I know. I'm getting to my question. I won't be long. Does offer that incentive to come downtown. You've identified the three options that you prefer. Is there, if council was to take one of them out, is there one that you would prefer them to take out over another? I know that's like asking, which child you prefer, but.
Through the chair, I wouldn't want any of them taken out. I think I've given solid reason to provide that it's really important to have some free Saturday parking. We do get compared to other cities. I think that we want to support the market. We want people to come down here and use the Kitchener market and stay and maybe have lunch. So Saturday is really important. We're trying really hard to get our nightlife engaged again because we have a lot more restaurants locating to downtown Kitchener. That's a fantastic sign. So I like the idea of free parking starting at 5 o'clock. And again, I will state strongly that the Monday to Friday OTR passes that the ambassadors and businesses are giving out are just vital. It's just it's a nice gesture to say, we know it was tough to get down here, but here's something to make it a little bit better.
Okay. Thanks, Linda. At the appropriate time, I'd like to move this motion.
Very good. Councillor Ioannidis?
Thank you, Chair Davey. Thanks, Linda, for coming in. My question is, since the LRT is a regional project, did you go to the region at all and ask for any services that they could provide to alleviate the situation?
So through the chair, we have had some support from the region in terms of providing some funds back for the signage. So to date, the BIA has spent about somewhere between $8,000 and $9,000 on having signs made for the Charles Street area. We do get a small portion of that money back. We are always told that whatever they do for Waterloo, they'll do for Kitchener, so they're working with us on our marketing programs. We are implementing another program for Charles Street to help them out in November with a promotional activity, and they're paying for the print material for that. I have not gone to the region to ask for support regarding parking.
Okay. Chair Davey, when it's appropriate, I want to add an addition to this item.
Noted. Thank you. Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Chair Davey. Thank you so much for coming in, Linda. I'm really in support of all the help we can do. My concern with reading this is if I'm a customer, this doesn't seem to be overly simple for me. Like, what is it? Surface parking one day? Is it garages one day? I would love to see something like just a straightforward, simple 2 hours free parking, surface or garage. Does that appeal to you or the BIA?
There's certainly, through the chair, there certainly is an appeal to making it very, very simple in that there's 2 hour free parking Monday to Saturday in these 3 garages, and all surface lots start at 5. One of the reasons that we continued with the OTR passes is because of the measurability. And I might ask if Paul McCormick can speak more to that. I know he's here in terms of...
well, actually, what we'll do is there'll be questions of staff afterwards, Councillor Schneider, if you want to follow.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Yaneski?
Yes, thank you. In terms of handing out the passes to customers, even though they may not even buy a product there, do you find that there's maybe abuse of them being distributed by certain businesses as opposed to others? And are they accountable as to how many passes they get for distribution?
Through the chair. That was a concern that was brought up when I initially met with the parking department to ask about having some free hour passes and the OTRs being handed out. And that's one of the reasons we didn't walk into business and say, okay, we're doing a pilot project and for the next 3 months, here's 200 passes, use them as you wish. We used our ambassadors to visit the businesses even bi-weekly to ask them how it was going, and that we would have a red alert if a small business was asking for 100 passes a week or 50 passes a week, then we would know that they weren't using them properly. We did not experience that in the 3 months.
Okay, appreciate that question. Then your request here for these passes would be as long as the ION construction is taking place to 2017. So we're looking for the next 2-3 years, basically, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. We're looking, this proposal is during LRT construction.
Okay. Also with this, and I know from previous years that the City Council has provided some reduction in terms of passes or fees, or however the term is, during the Christmas season, coming up being December, to encourage Christmas shoppers come downtown, do their Christmas shopping and stuff like that. Is this sort of a duplicate of it, or are we going to have that Christmas thing again, or is it all covered in this whole package?
Through the chair, this is not a duplicate of the Christmas package. We have been in an agreement to subsidize free parking during the Christkindle market up to a certain point. And in the past, that hasn't amounted to a huge significant amount. I believe that was just with the City Hall parking garage for downtown.
Okay. So with implementing these options, the passes that you're referring to would apply only to the parking garage, because for service parking after 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, you just go park there. You don't have to worry about paying anything. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. So the surface lots would be free at 5 o'clock. The parking passes are for the 3 garages that we've recommended in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Most of my questions have been answered. I was mainly concerned with the situation here is something that will be in place just until the LRT is completed. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Yeah. So, to me, all your problems here are caused by the LRT. I want to go back to why would you not go to the region, who are looking after the LRT, to get support? I mean, you've said they've given you some little support on doing signs and things like that, which to me is they should be doing that in the first instance. So, but why are you not going to the region for? You need $100,000 here, close to it, $87,000. Why do you not go to the region and ask them to foot that bill? Now, down the road, some of your businesses are if they're going to can't be sustained, are they going to be going after the City of Kitchener, or are they going to be going after the region in addition to this?
Through the chair, I'll answer the second question first. What the businesses do in terms of who or how they would go after, I can't control that, whether that would be the city or the region. So I really can't answer that question. To answer your first question, the reason that I came to the City of Kitchener first is because of the understanding and watching of the garages that I'm asking for. They aren't fully utilized today, and it seems like a good solution and a quicker solution. We're in this situation right now. It's happening quickly, and I'm looking for a solution that I can take back to the businesses as soon as possible because of what's been happening. We understand that the City of Kitchener garage is probably full more often, so of course it has to be upon availability. But we know that Charles and Benton and the Duke Street garage they're just not fully utilized, so it seems like a solution that would allow us to compete with the other cities that do have 2-hour free parking and attract more people to our downtown, because this downtown belongs to the whole city.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're trying to do. That's fine, but the fact here is we've got problems that are caused by the LRT.
Questions, Councillor Gazzola, not comments. Thank you. Just one final clarifying question. If I understood correctly, and if you could clarify, Ms. Yetsey, the only There hasn't been any business incentives from the region of Waterloo. It's only been with respect to signage.
To the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. There are no further questions. Thank you kindly for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, questions of staff. Mayor Rabinovich.
Thank you. And maybe just one clarification on that, because there's been a number of, there has been arrangements for some funding and so on around the signage, but there's also been a program put in place to the businesses to do some subsidized radio advertising. To the best of my knowledge, very few of them have taken advantage of that. So just wanted to...
So there should be money in the budget then?
Sorry?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
I said there must be money in the budget then, but go ahead.
Yes. Two questions in terms of staff. So the recommendation here is that the dollars would transfer out of the Economic Development Reserve and into the parking enterprise. I guess my question, and maybe this is more a finance question than a parking enterprise, because I understand the parking enterprise would like to see those revenues in there. But quite frankly, those revenues may not even be existing right now. And so my question to Mr. Chapman is there a scenario, quite frankly, where we implement this, but we don't transfer any dollars? So there's no hit on the taxpayer or on the Economic Development Reserve.
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, I think before I do answer that, it would be appropriate for Mr. McCard to comment on whether or not this is theoretical new usage or this is replacing and costed based on actual usage that's happening there today, because that answer would determine my response.
Mr. McCormick?
Through you, Mr. Chair, when we looked at all the data, it's very easy for us to see what is being used in the garage because we use the use of OTRs. We have a mechanism there that we can track whether we give away 2 hours free or whether someone pays, and we can narrow that down and get to actual dollars. I looked at all the uses, say, on a Saturday in all our garages, and I was able to determine how many spots were used on a Saturday, how many are used in the first 2 hours, and that's where a lot of our numbers came from, so it's actual data. The only one that gives us a little more difficulty is surface lots. As soon as you open that up, there's no mechanism to track. So between 6 and 9, although we have a subsidy that has been historically in there, there's no way of really tracking down between 5 and 6. So what we can do is take the data from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. and then work out those numbers from there.
Mr. Chapman?
Mr. Chair, so based on that response, I think the answer is twofold. It was my understanding that there is usage that's paid usage now that we know will become free usage, and that will be a direct financial loss to the parking enterprise. That needs to be funded. I think there could be an argument that if usage increases over this time frame, whether or not that's a marketing and promotion endeavor, that's a business decision, but at this point the recommendation is largely based on the usage that's generating revenue for which there would be no revenue if this was implemented.
Okay, so then that does kind of get to my second question, which is if we saw a scenario where because of the marketing and so on, in fact, the opposite happens. We're now seeing more activity and people are staying longer than 2 hours, and therefore we're actually maintaining revenues and not seeing the losses that are being budgeted. Could this be set up in a mechanism to have an upset limit of the dollar figures that are being talked about? In other words, if we ultimately end up seeing growth, we're not going to take the hit from the Economic Development Reserve Fund.
Through you, Chair Davies. We're kind of limited by the parking equipment and the technology that we have. So in our garages, we have the ability to handle 1 hour, 2 hour, 5 hour OTRs. If someone parks for 2 hours and they have a 5 hour OTR, the system will track the 2 hour difference. There is no mechanism to track specific users and say, you're allowed to park longer because you're now going to stay downtown, as compared to, say, someone who normally comes down and is an office worker or something like that?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I guess what I'm saying, or what my question is right now, the costs associated with 2B are estimated to be $35,000, with 3C are estimated to be a minimum of $27,000, and for 4, approximately $15,000. That's based on the calculations that you have made of the hits you're going to take to your budget. Mr. Chapman has said, from an accounting perspective, it's only appropriate that we transfer those funds. My comment, or my question is, if in fact, because of the efforts, we start seeing more people coming downtown and your budget doesn't take those hits, because you're basing it on assumptions, but if at the end of the day your budget comes in at the amounts that you had budgeted for, even with these programs in place, can there be a scenario where we either charge economic development a part of that amount, or the full amount that's being talked about?
I'm going to let Mr. Reedman jump in here.
Through the chair, this is our estimated minimum impact to the parking enterprise. Staff's recommendation would be to continue to track where we can. Whether council wishes to set a cap, that's up to council to decide. The one thing that we haven't quantified in this is the potential lost revenue from other areas for people shifting to the free parking option. For instance, on Saturday in the surface lots, we would still charge under this scenario. We may see additional revenue lost from those lots as people shift over to the parking garages. So it's kind of, not really a worst case scenario, it's a very lean scenario on our revenue loss. So I'd like council to consider that in any decision they make.
Okay, and Mr. McCormick, do you have anything left to add? But Mr. Mayor, you'd have to queue in again. Okay, your time expired.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair Davey. That is correct. So our intent is that if the OTR program is more successful, obviously there would be a larger increase. If it's less successful, especially on the garages on the Saturday and the 2-hour program, which is option 4 and 3C, we're going to charge out what is being used. The only one that is a number that we're using historical data is the 5 to 6 p.m., which as soon as we open that up to free parking, there's no way of tracking that anymore.
Okay, thank you. There's still 3 people in the queue. Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I support these recommendations, but in the interests of transparency, could one staff member tell me the annual cost of the existing parking subsidies? I know in an earlier report there was a figure of $222,500 cost. I don't know if that's total or 2015. So first of all, I wanted to know the cost of the existing subsidies. That's my first question.
Through you, Chair Davey. The existing 2016 budgeted or 2015 budget?
2015.
15. The total subsidy is $1.2 million, which includes a number of different subsidies built into that.
My second question, the cost of what is in this report, what is being recommended, the cost of the additional subsidies per year.
Sorry, Councillor Etherington, the question is how much?
Yeah.
It's $77,000.
And the total, so what would be the total annual cost of all parking subsidies? Do we even know that?
Through you, Chair Davey, the existing is $1.2 million. If we add in the $77,000, which is in this report, plus an estimated $10,000, which is a one-time cost, it would be approaching $1.3 million for 2016.
Sorry, Mr. Reedman, did you want to comment as well?
Through the chair, I'd also like to remind council that the parking enterprise provides a fairly aggressive dividend to the tax base of $1.75 million.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. Question of staff. Just what would stop for option 3C, 2 hours free Saturday parking in the garages without the little parking coupon? What would stop individuals who need to stay in downtown all day from going in and out every 2 hours? Or would they be able to do that?
Through you, Chair Davey, they would be able to do that if they were working, say, for 8-9 hours on a Saturday. They could, in fact, do that.
I mean, it's a pain, but I imagine some people might.
And if Council recalls, last year in our budget process, the Market Garage had that in place, and we were able to change that around this year, and it's worked out fairly successful. On the Saturday, we don't have as many downtown employees, like they're not office workers, they're the retailers, but they would have that ability to do that if they were allowed to get off every 2 hours.
So if we implemented the recommended options, all three of them, wouldn't that potentially, I want a question of all staff, maybe Mr. Bloom might want to chime in on this one as well. Just want to know, why wouldn't we go for option 3D instead of 3C, so that all garages would require a pass on any day of the week, and then all surface lots after 5 would be free without a pass? I'm just wondering if staff could comment on whether or not they feel it would be confusing to the retailers who are handing out the passes to say, oh, well, do I give them a pass because it's a Saturday or not? I forget, or if they give passes on the Saturday and then the clients go and try to use it, but they don't need it. I'm trying to understand how can we make this simple for everyone?
Mr. Bloom?
Through the chair, I think our preference for 3C over 3D gets to Councillor Schneider's comment about trying to simplify it for the customer, for them just to understand it's 2 hours, you show up at any garage and you get your first 2 hours for free, versus showing up and, oh, where do I have to get my pass from? I don't know which retailers I get a pass from. So I think we looked at 3C as a much simpler for our residents as opposed to, so it may be a little more confusing to the business, but potentially easier for the resident.
So the resident who goes to the garage on a weekday needs the pass, and then they go there on a Saturday and they suddenly don't need the pass. Is that what you're recommending?
That's correct, yeah.
And you don't think that might be confusing to people? Okay.
Maybe.
Mr. Riebman?
Okay.
Through the chair, we also want to recognize that we don't want people to abuse the system on weekdays when our parking demand is high. So employees in the downtown could easily loop through the garage every 2 hours. So that's the reason for the two different mechanisms.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I have two questions, but first, the first one I would like to ask Mr. Chapman, dealing with insurance, and then I have a question of Mr. McCormick. When a business suffers a substantial loss due to construction by a municipality, are they able to claim that loss from their insurance companies?
Mayor Rabinovich?
Well, just in light of how this question was answered at the region, I would suggest this is a caucus matter.
Councillor Gazzola, is it important enough, shall I say, that is your decision on this item, whether that we recess in the caucus?
No, I don't want to do that because I guess my question will be answered in the fullness of time. Fine, thank you. Let me ask Mr. McCormick, has our parking operation, our parking business sustained a considerable loss or any loss this year because of the LRT?
Through you, Chair Davey, we are getting that information because it always lags behind. Yeah. We have noticed some decrease in, say, the transit law, which is Law 22 right beside the bus station. that has been closed down for a number of months with partial usage, so definitely that will be impacted. Charles and Benton Garage, I have seen less traffic through there as the construction rolls through and causes disruptions along Charles Street.
I guess my main question is it the impact of this, will it be a substantial figure?
Through you, Chair Davey, every quarter in the parking business is substantial. So,
okay, that answers my question.
I can take a look at Lot 22 and give you an idea of what the annual revenue is.
Well, that's not necessary. I think you've answered my question.
Thank you. Before we, Councillor Hernandez, have you asked questions on this item yet? Okay, pardon me. Councillor Hernandez.
Thank you, Chair Davey. Mr. McCormick, the question I want to ask is, do we keep monthly statistics on parking, on how much our parking lots are being used?
Yes, we get them in our monthly financial indicators.
Okay. So then we've been doing this for how many months? Like, have we been doing this for years?
I'm looking at, we've been doing it since we moved it, I don't know, I'm going to say 3 years ago, but if you're interested in the trend,
yes, that's
we've been averaging a bit above our target this year, and oddly enough, actually in July and August it started going up a bit higher, and September is quite a bit higher than our target.
So it's something doesn't jive here. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Your question to ask?
I don't know.
Mr. McCormick?
Through you, Chair Davey. The data that you're looking for is a key performance indicator on monthly parking. And so we had an uplift on monthly parkers. So that doesn't give you an indication quite as well as, say, the daily or hourly customers, which we track differently. So that's the information you're looking at this point.
Okay, so what we're looking at here then is just the total number of monthly parkers versus the revenue that brings in.
That's correct.
Okay, that's a valid point. Not seeing any further questions. I'm not sure this is a question of you, Mr. McCormick, but my question is there any value from staff's vantage in approaching the region before we were to approve something like this and saying, hey, this is your situation, we're just trying to deal with it, and perhaps some sort of cost sharing whereby they pay half of the anticipated costs of the city? Mr. Reedman.
Through the chair, my recommendation would be to approve this, and staff can go to the region and talk to them about any recovery availability.
Okay, thank you. I am seeing no further questions of staff, so I'm looking, actually, Councillor Fernandez indicated movement of the motion as written. Okay. Did you want to speak to it as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, Councillor Fernandez.
Yeah. I see that the businesses that have been struggling in the downtown core, and, I think that this is a great first step to try and help some of the businesses recoup some of their losses. Often when people actually have a 2-hour incentive, they'll stay for 3 hours. They might stay for 4 hours. So I think that although I do see our parking enterprise losing some money, the suggestion that I'm understanding is that it come from our Economic Development Reserve Fund, which is exactly one of the reasons we set up that the EDIF was to help the downtown and to support the downtown. So I don't understand why there would be any reluctance to use the money from that reserve fund for this specific suggestion. I've been following the monthly indicators, and I have seen an uptake in our monthly parkers, and I think that that's a good sign. I know that I've always been hammering away at the Charles and Benton parking garage, so hopefully some of that shift is a positive thing. I think if we see a way to help our businesses through this time, and yes, it is a regional initiative, and yes, LRT is the cause of that. And I think it's good to hear from Mr. Reedman that we will approach the region. And of course, the mayor sits on the region council. So let's hope that that's a twofold objective, that not only will we support our businesses this way, but that we can get some additional funding from the region. And maybe the BIA needs to also support the whole idea of reduced advertising that the region is doing. So I wholeheartedly support this. I think this is something that we can do for the next 2 years to help our business, and maybe we will attract a couple of new businesses, and that would be fabulous.
Actually, I'm going to put Councillor Ioannidis in next, as he indicated an amendment, just so we can have broad comments. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, well, my amendment was just to do an addition that staff be directed to engage with the region to cooperate and somehow recoup some of our costs.
Okay, thank you. As an amendment, I think it's important to have a separate and comment.
Yeah, I think it's, I would have preferred to see the region be step up to the plate, and this is their project, and this was one of the concerns that I had when the LRT was being implemented, that some of these costs we're going to be bearing as our taxpayers, and this is something that was totally a cause from this project. So I will support the recommendation, because I recognize that we need to do something now. We can't wait to see what's going to happen with the region. So yes, I'll be supporting the recommendation.
Councillor Etherington?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Well, I certainly share the concern about loss of parking revenue, but at the same time, I think we have to do everything possible to support our remaining downtown businesses cope with the economic impact of LRT and closed roads and detours in the core. I know from calls I'm getting that some of those businesses are taking quite a financial beating. I don't believe this parking proposal alone will solve those economic woes, but I think it will help mitigate the short-term and severe consequences of construction in what is the heart of our city. I'd also point out that I support Councillor Ioannidis, point out that as a supporter of light rail transit, I think that current LRT delays are going to almost certainly impact the eventual cost of the project, and will have an additional impact down the road on all taxpayers, including the downtown businesses we're currently trying to help. And that's why I support this suggestion that I think we're whistling Dixie, but I think we should try to get the region to do more to help.
Mayor Vominovich.
Thank you very much. I will be supporting the recommendation for the parking adjustments that's before us today, and I'm also fine wearing my city hat with supporting the request from our council for staff to have dialogue with the region around how they can participate in this. I think there may be some other opportunities for the region to look at and be pursuing that we should look at as well, which we should be encouraging. For example, trying to see how the region may partner with the BIA in the future to bring more students down here from U of Waterloo and Laurier, or up from Conestoga, and get them up here in the evening spending some money as well. I think that's something that needs to be looked at and pursued more vigorously. But in the meantime, I can tell you, I too have heard from property owners, from business owners, and so on, concerns around the impact of the construction, and in particular the impact of the closure of King Street while they put the underpass in underneath the railway. And that certainly has impacted the free flow of people. If nothing else, from a perception point of view, and that's creating some challenges. I anticipate part of the response from regional staff with respect to this first year of closures will be that a lot of it is focused around the replacement of city infrastructure that's underneath the roadway, and we would have incurred that at some point when we undertook the replacement of that infrastructure. So I'm just sort of preparing people for what I think may be some of the response and reaction, because that's some of what I've heard when I've raised it at the region. So with that, though, I will support this, and I think we need to continue to work diligently, especially with new people coming to live downtown later this year, as the two new condos start populating with residents, as well as our tech sector continues to grow. We need to ensure we continue to provide for and develop a vibrant urban life that is going to be consistent with seeing the success of that portion of our local economy.
There's 6 people still with comments. Councillor Yuniesky.
Yeah, I too will be supporting a recommendation here of the 3 options. I think it's the way to go. We do have a situation here in the core that is being quite affected, and we have basically people who work here 5 days a week, and they're here automatically to come to business, support shopping and restaurants, etc. And then there's the other people we've got to get down here, and that's the issue that we're trying to address to get them to come down here, notwithstanding all the construction. We basically provide the parking facilities with the parking garages and the surface parking, so we have a responsibility there. But the whole issue that we have as a problem is the construction of the LRT, and that's done by the region. So I'm of the opinion that the region is quite responsible for having this problem created by their construction. I mean, there's a benefit in the long run, but on the other hand, it's a cause in the short term for these businesses right now. So with the amendment that's before us to have the region be involved, I would suggest that they pay half the bill, 50%. If I could make that an amendment to that, I'd be prepared to add that we go ahead and have the region pay for half the losses that we have incurred on the reduced parking.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's a range of measures that we could possibly use to help our businesses in the core, and it's going to continue to be a turbulent time for our economy in the core, obviously with the restricted access into our downtown because of the LRT construction. So this is just one measure that we can use at our disposal. I think this can't be the only one. I encourage our staff working with the BIA from our economic development to look at other ways to perhaps bring in more people into our core. And I think I applaud what Mayor Verbenovich has said, that perhaps there's ways that we can work with the region to encourage and with a form of transit access into the downtown to bring more students here to help our businesses. So, and speaking to the amendment that Councillor Ioannidis has put forward, I think that's the right direction. We do need to put the pressure on the region to do what they can in supporting or lessening the impact that's taking place. Ultimately, the business owners are paying property taxes that not only come to the city, but they also go to the region. They need to be kept. I think sometimes at the lower tier municipal level, I think sometimes we're a little too soft on putting the pressure on the region for them to live up to some of the responsibilities that they have, not only to their basic core service delivery, but also, of course, the impacts that derive from the activity that they implement into the region. And this is one avenue where that we need to go to them and encourage some sort of participation. If it's not through this program, at least we need to continue looking at, because this is only going to be a small impact. We need to continue that engagement forward with the region. I would love for, even if the amendment were to pass with the region paying for half the cost, I think that it's probably not likely. I don't want to, I don't want to impact our measure on our core to pass this and send a clear direction to the businesses in our core and showing that the City of Kitchener is willing to do everything that we can. I think there needs to be above and beyond what the region needs to come to the table with what they can provide, and they have a large breadth of resources at their disposal that they could assist with too. So again, this is one measure that I'm willing to support. But again, through my comments, I'd like to support and encourage the BIA and our staff through economic development that we need to look at some other forms of too, that not necessarily aspect of just dollars and cents, but advertising, marketing strategies that we could implement and put forward that could further stimulate what we're doing here, and of course continue to work and encouraging the region to do their part as well.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I want to start off by reminding everyone that the LRT is going beyond the downtown, and there are other large commercial business areas in our community that are being affected and have been affected considerably. One of the areas is in the ward that I represent. But having said that, I'm prepared to support what is before us, but one of the important things is that, to me, this is a regional project. We work at an arm's length with the region. This is part of the LRT cost. It's not a bad part. It's something that has to have been expected when we start to disrupt a busy community, a busy downtown, and it should be part of the total project. It's not something that should fall on our small and large businesses who are struggling to stay alive. I think in the fullness of time, they and their insurance companies will be looking at that. So I'm totally in support of where we're going. I'm in support of going after the region, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't even talk about 50% and any percentage. If this is a cost that's being imposed upon us because of the LRT, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's their cost, and it's part of the LRT cost, so it's 100% part of that cost. As we go along, I think the mayor has brought up a point. We don't need to deal with it today, but as to whether this gets charged to our tax rolls or to our enterprise, I think staff need to look at that and look at it fairly closely, that it may end up that part of this, what we're doing here, could legitimately be said to remain with the parking enterprise, and part of it go to the taxpayer. But that will work out in the fullness of time, as will in the future, hopefully, that the region will be ponying up this amount to include in their LRT full coverage.
Councillor Marsh.
I'd like a recorded vote on all of it too, and we'll do it. Sorry.
Very good. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I just want to comment that this is a positive step in the right direction for supporting our downtown businesses, and I do also appreciate that this motion is being put forward and also widely supported by councillors from all parts of the city. I also want to echo the mayor's comments that it's very important for us to look to non-drivers to draw them to the downtown by arranging for buses to bring students, but not just students, anybody who would be taking transit and not driving. And of course, we do have several free bicycle parking options always available. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I'm very happy to support what's before us. I want to thank staff for their hard work that went into this. This is something we may be able to read in maybe 5-10 minutes, but the the time for researching and costing and finding out all the implications for all the options took a lot of time and effort, and it's very thorough, and it's fantastic. I appreciate that. I like the customer, the business focus of this. My wish is that you make it as easy and welcoming as possible for our citizens to take advantage of this. I also support Councillor Ioannidis' amendment for the regional support. I don't want to limit it to just 50% financial, because there can also be other incentives and other forms of support that come. So that's my comment on that.
Thank you. I'll be supporting Councillor Ioannidis' amendment, but I'm not going to be supporting the main motion. Not because I don't think this is the right direction, but because I don't think we should be funding it. Yes, we're asking the region to pay for half of it, but we're saying, yes, we're going to approve it regardless whether you pay half of it or not. And we all know that when that's the situation, the reality is if we're telling the region we're going to fund the whole thing, if you guys say no, they're more than likely going to say no. I would rather see this contingent upon some sharing of the funding. And to be clear too, I mean, someone that didn't see the region as a partner would say, hey, you know what, you should be paying the full $77,000 plus HST. But I see us as a partner, absolutely, and in the light rail transit project as well. So that's why I'm suggesting that half of it is more than appropriate. So with that, recorded vote has been called on all of the items, Councillor Guzzola. Okay, so we'll start first with Councillor Ioannidis' amendment that staff be directed to seek additional funding from the region. And that carries unanimously. And now the main motion. Oh, pardon me. Oh, Councillor Yaneski, did I miss?
Yeah, I asked that motion that Councillor Ioannidis had be amended to make a 50% requirement.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have zoned out.
I'm supporting his motion, which is fine. I agree with it, but it's just
okay.
That
So point of order then. So first we will deal with Councillor Yaneski's, and this would change my. Somehow I missed that. I must have been reading. So ignore that vote because we have to take Councillor Yaneski's amendment to Councillor Ioannidis' amendment first. So just so everyone's clear, Councillor Yaneski, let me know if I'm capturing it correctly. Your amendment is that the region must pay half in order for the approval of this going forward? Okay. I will support that. Is everyone else clear on that? Mayor Vubanovich?
Yeah, it seems to have gone from that the request, which is what Councillor Ioannidis' motion has asked for, be 50% to now saying, if I understand the amendment correctly, that it has to be 50%.
Councillor Yaneski, could you cue in again and clarify? Is your amendment that the request is 50% or a condition of approval is 50%? Do you understand that?
No, I'm not sure where you're coming from.
What staff was intending to do is that the motion is saying that we will approve this, and even if the region doesn't pay a penny, we will fund the entire portion out of economic development. That was Councillor Ioannidis' motion was that we seek some sort of additional funding from the region. Your motion was that we seek 50% of the region, but whether they pay for it or not, we will still approve it. Is that your intention, or is your intention that if the region doesn't pay anything, that we don't pay anything?
No, my intention is that the region pay half for it because they're the sort of the cause of it, and by going forward with this, and if we don't put a figure on there, they can just say forget it and not be interested. But I feel we should be aiming for 50% for it. And if the region comes back and says no, then I guess it still falls on us to continue on. But I think we should aim for 50%. I mean, I think Guzola's think that we should go maybe 100% because really they are that way. But I'm just trying to say that, okay, since we own the parking garages and since it's a regional thing, let's split it 50-50.
Okay, so Councillor Yaneski, the operative part here is If the region says no, does the city fund it in full anyway?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So is everyone clear on that then? So Councillor Yanetsky's motion is that the direction be that staff try and achieve 50% or more. Okay? Councillor Gazzola?
I'm taking Councillor Ioannidis' resolution as saying we're aiming for 100%.
Okay. Okay, so Councillor Ioannidis?
I didn't want to put a dollar or a percentage on that because maybe the region's going to fully give 100%. I don't know. I'm hopeful, but yeah, that's why I won't support the 50.
Okay, so some may not support the 50 because if you say 50%, Councillor Yanetsky, that means that we can't try and achieve more than that. So.
Well, then, if the original motion is the objective to go for 100%, maybe we should just say 100% and then decide what we can get.
I think that's implied, up to 100%. Right, okay.
Is that if that's that, okay, I'll withdraw mine then.
I apologize for missing that portion. So again, I guess Councillor Ioannidis' motion has already moved and carried, so now we'll vote on the main motion. Those in favor? And I'm the only one opposed. Okay, we will now, that concludes the items, so we will recess and reconvene. At, what time are we at now? Yes, Mayor Vrbanovich?
Motion to go in, call the special council meeting to order. Motion to go in camera, moved by Councillor Singh, seconded by Councillor Fernandez. Any discussion? All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Motion.
Oh, question, pardon me. Councillor Fernandez?
Yeah, no question on the authorization. I have a question on number 2.
They were coming back to those at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. And Councillor Ioannidis?
I just want to know why we're going in camera.
For the 2 items that are listed on the agenda.
Yeah, why are we? Why can't they be discussed in?
Because they're in camera items.
Okay, well, that's why I want to ask.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is, why are they in camera items? Mr. Chapman.
In the case of the first item, it has clear labor relations implications and can be related to identifiable individuals.
Okay.
Okay, so all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Motion to recess, moved by Councillor Singh, seconded by Councillor March. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried.
You well? Staying out of trouble? Hey, Dave. Yes, sir. A lot of great bowls.
Colin?
Mr. Mayor, how are you this fine day? Where's your acting? How are you? Hello. I'm sorry I didn't email you. Did you get my email today? Oh, I had a board meeting last Wednesday. The board's in favor of this. We're hoping it's going to be the shortest item. Thank you. Are you going to say that? Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, I'd like to ask everyone to please take their seats. Good afternoon. Apologies for being a little late. We were tied up in caucus back there. We will get right into it. We're going to begin with Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The presentation that I'll be giving can be found in your package today. It's on page 3-19 if you'd like to follow along. This slide lays out the order in which I'll address the content in the staff report. There are 15 slides to go through. It should take less than 10 minutes, after which the delegations will address you. All of the content is drawn from your staff report, so there's nothing new here. This simply summarizes the highlights from a very lengthy staff report. As you know, Arts Build Ontario was retained to develop a refreshed council mandate for Centre in the Square, and in approving that mandate, council directed staff to undertake this governance review for Centre in the Square. While this work was a staff accountability, the process was developed jointly with the CITS board chair, and it involved 2 meetings with the Centre in the Square board as well as meetings with the resident organizations to discuss the issues. Based on our research, we developed a working definition for governance, and from that we developed a range of service delivery options. Not unlike other local boards, the original legislation envisions shared governance between the city and the appointed board for Centre in the Square. The board is to maintain, operate, and manage the theatre, and the city at arm's length appoints the board and provides a degree of financial oversight. Through our review, it became clear that the reasonable range of options are 1, direct delivery by the city, and 2, continuing with the local board model. Under the direct delivery model, the operations of Centre in the Square would be folded into the city's administration. From our benchmarking, we see that this is similar to the model that's in place for Brampton, Kingston, and Oakville. And while in some respects it could simplify governance, it could also have adverse financial implications, as we've outlined in the report. Council is most familiar with this option as it represents the current model. And we believe that a local board provides for focus and specialization. Also, in the case of Centre in the Square, pursuit of unique financial opportunities. And lastly, and not insignificantly, less political influence in programming decisions. Through our consultation, stakeholders have articulated the current challenges with this model, which are the focus of the balance of our presentation. Summarized on this slide are the main governance challenges that we've heard raised by stakeholders, including the CITS board. There are 4 things. First, we heard that cross-appointments from the Symphony and from the Art Gallery to Centre in the Square don't reflect contemporary best practice in governance and aren't satisfying the communications expectations in any event. We heard that there are extraordinary costs associated with transitioning to the new mandate beyond the means of the board to fund. We heard that the board is hard-pressed to address deferred capital maintenance on an aging facility within the current capital funding model. And lastly, we heard that the presence of council members on the board raises questions about board independence. The recommendations in the report seek to address or respond to all of these issues. So here's the overarching recommendation. In the view of staff, the local board model has served the community well over the 35-year history of the Centre in the Square, and we believe it should be retained while addressing the specific challenges identified by stakeholders. And this is consistent with the advice that you received both from Webb and from ArtsBuild. Webb said that we should seek to cause minimal disruption while empowering the board to assume more control. And ArtsBuild said that change should be incremental. As I've said, the focus then ought to be on responding to the challenges raised by stakeholders through specific improvements to the governance model. There are 5 recommendations, and these address 5 out of the 6 issues which have been raised by stakeholders. All of the stakeholders agree that the current practice of cross-appointment from KWS and KW Art Gallery boards to the Centre in the Square board should cease. This is in keeping with current governance best practice. But it's also important to respect the intent of the original legislation. So it's proposed that Centre in the Square board receive a slate of nominees from the resident organizations from which they would still choose 2, one for the Art Gallery and one for the Symphony. But it's important to note that these nominees could not and would not any longer be sitting board members from KWS or KW Art Gallery. And to that end, there would be no expectation that they would communicate back into the KWS or KW Art Gallery organizations once they've been appointed to the Centre in the Square board. And Mr. Bennett may seek to clarify today, Mr. Craker from the Art Gallery, the nominations from those agencies have always been at the options of those boards. And so there was some confusion as to whether or not the recommendations require them to put forward a slate, even if they had no names to put forward. And we want to be clear that this has been and always remains at the option of those organizations. If they're unable to put names forward, we cannot force their hand in that matter. Recommendation number 2 seeks to strengthen communications channels between Centre in the Square and the Symphony and the Art Gallery, recognizing that the board liaison model will no longer exist. The report provides more detail on the proposed communications model, which was at the suggestion of the resident organizations, and we believe that the mechanism to address that is through future memorandums of understanding, which will be developed and spell out the relationship at each level. But essentially, they reflect a mutual commitment to open, regular, and proactive communications at various levels, all the way from board to board, down to staff at the front line. As I've mentioned, the board has expressed concerns that the budget is not sufficient to cover the costs of transitioning to a new mandate. This recommendation seeks formal council confirmation of a commitment that you've made previously that in addition to a new permanent grant level of $1.75 million, there will be transitional support as the expanded calendar is filled and the organization shifts over a 4-year time frame. Obviously, this funding is always subject to the approval through the annual budget process, and when you receive your packages in a week or so for this year's operating budget, you'll see how we propose to address that issue for 2016. This recommendation seeks to clarify issues surrounding capital maintenance, and it does 3 things. First, it affirms the decision-making authority of the board for facility maintenance. Second, it outlines a collaborative process developed by City and Centre in the Square staff to ensure a shared understanding of capital requirements between the 2 major capital funders. And third, and I think most importantly, it starts to clarify a division of responsibility for capital maintenance, as shown on the next slide, something which was identified as a key need by Centre in the Square board members. So here you see that notional division of responsibility for funding related to capital maintenance. We believe that some proposed areas of responsibilities are black and white, but others are gray, meaning that funding responsibility would be determined based on the specific nature of the work. And so I'll give you an example. If plumbing work was being undertaken or necessitated because the Centre wanted to upgrade their bar facilities to expand their bar presence in the facility, we believe that that's primarily a plumbing project that would be funded and should be funded by the Centre. On the other hand, if plumbing upgrades were required because existing plumbing had reached the end of its life, we believe that that more reflects an expenditure that the city's building owner should be responsible for. And a project that does both, perhaps increases an amenity for the centre and also replaces aging infrastructure, may be funded jointly by the parties, and that would be subject to negotiation. This will all be refined further in 2016, and you should see it addressed more clearly in the 2017 capital budget. The terms of reference for Centre in the Square board members speaks generally to the role of the board, and it's our recommendation that they be expanded to clarify the unique role of council in several areas, and we've outlined those in Appendix A. So you may want to refer to that, but our proposal is that the Centre in the Square would consider those, build them in as appropriate to their board orientation manual for council and non-council members alike. Because the issue was raised by some stakeholders, staff provided analysis in the report related to the number of councillors on the CITS board. Our internal benchmarking against other local boards identified that for the size of the CITS board, the number of councillors is average. On that basis, staff have not made any specific recommendations in this area. So that summarizes the highlights of the report. Should you support the recommendations today, staff will work with the Centre in the Square, KWS, and KW Art Gallery to finalize the board nomination process for the upcoming year. We do anticipate that this will require an extension of the current board positions for a couple more months. We have advertised 4 board nominations, but have not forwarded those on yet to the Centre in the Square, so it will take them some time to fill their vacancies, and also for the 2 resident organizations to put forward their nominations to the Centre board. So on November the 16th, when you're dealing with committee appointments for next year, you'll see a recommendation to extend the terms of current CITS board members until those positions can be filled. The transition costs will be dealt with as part of the 2016 budget, and the balance of the recommendations will be referred to the CITS board for implementation. I'd be pleased now to respond to any questions of clarification, or you may wish to consider hearing from the delegations first, and then after that I could respond to questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Pardon me, I think it's appropriate we hear from the delegations first and then Gallagher. Question. Okay, actually, Mr. Chapman, one quick question from Councillor Gallagher-Seelock.
I'm just wondering, we ended up with a second report on our desk. Is there something significantly different with the report on our desk versus the one that was in our package?
No, through an administrative oversight, you have the second to final draft in your package. The only difference is in the capital recommendation, and not even in the recommendation itself, it's in the body of the report. It's recommendation number 4. There was language in there around how the Centre in the Square would engage with the Art Gallery and the Symphony, and through further discussion, we've clarified that wording in the bullet points, so it doesn't impact the recommendations at all.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Okay, good question. Okay, we'll begin with Mr. Bruce Gordon, who's the chair of the Centre in the Square.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as he just indicated, my name is Bruce Gordon, and I'm the chairman of the board of the Centre in the Square. I've been here before. It's good to be here again. I want to start by thanking Dan and the rest of the city staff, because although this report is coming before you now, this work started in May, and there was a ton of work on history and comparatives and dialogue back and forth. Dan and I did meet with the Symphony and the Art Gallery. Dan has presented to the Centre in the Square board. It has gone to the boards of our partner organizations. We think it's a very good outcome that clarifies responsibilities and communications, many of which have already started. So on behalf of the board of the Centre in the Square, we do support this recommendation. And that's all that I wanted to add to Dan's presentation, Mr. Chair. I have with me Rob Sonoda, as I think most people know, and be glad to try and answer any questions.
Very good. Afternoon, Mr. Sonoda. Questions of the delegations? Mayor Vabanovich.
Thank you. Actually, more than questions, just rather a comment, and that's just to thank Bruce and the board for all of their hard work in dealing with this issue over the past number of months. I think it generated a fair bit of good discussion along the journey, but I think at the end of the day we've come up with a solid recommendation that will really allow us and as a city, as a Centre in the Square board, and the staff at the Centre in the Square to move forward in a positive way. And so at the appropriate time, I'd also like to move the recommendation.
Very good. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, I have more questions of staff, but quickly, similar to Mayor Bogdanovich's comments, to both of you, I think there has been a lot of effort and time that has gone into place, and working with city staff to get to this point, and of course engaging the board as well. And I have the privilege of sitting on the board, and I'm glad to see that the board has recommended or supported the recommendation. And I think we have a more solid foundation than we did before. So thank you to the both of you and your work along with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, there are no further questions I'd add as well. Being a member of the board, Mr. Gordon, I appreciate your work as well. Your steady hand's been useful throughout this process. Thank you. Okay, we will move on then to the next delegation. Mr. Bryce Craker, the president of the KW Art Gallery.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, and councillors, first of all, I'd like to pass along regrets from Shirley Medill, who can't be here today. As you may know, she is the chair of the board of the Canadian Art Museum Directors Organization, and they are having their meetings in Prince Edward Island this week. Thank you for the opportunity to address the staff report regarding Centre in the Square governance review. As one of the resident organizations within the Centre in the Square, we have been very pleased with the opportunity that has been afforded to the gallery to participate in the various ongoing discussions regarding Centre in the Square and its mandate. We did meet with the Centre's chair and with city staff in July to discuss governance and in particular to discuss the practice of direct appointments by the gallery of an individual who would sit on both the boards of the Centre and the gallery, ostensibly to facilitate the free flow of information as between the two organizations. Together with the conclusions of the report, we strongly believe that the objectives that were sought to be achieved through these cross-directorships have largely failed due to issues of fiduciary duties and board confidentiality, and in turn, the cross-directorships have instead raised the potential for conflicts of interest. We recognize and agree that the cross-directorship model is no longer viewed to be a governance best practice. Our board has met, and we fully support the recommendation of the cross-appointment. We fully support the recommendation that the cross-appointment of directors from the gallery to the Centre be immediately discontinued. And we are also fully supportive of the second recommendation that seeks to achieve the original objective of the cross-appointment through the proposed communications framework that includes the formalized communications as between operations, executive directors, the board chairs, and the boards themselves, and we look forward to these discussions in the future. We appreciate the fact that it has been recognized in this report that it may be important to ensure that gallery-friendly voices are continued to be heard around the Centre's board table, and we appreciate that the gallery will continue to have the opportunity to provide the Centre with a slate of 3 potential gallery nominees to the Centre's board for consideration by the Centre's nomination committee, and we understand and agree that these nominees will be independent of the gallery's board. I did speak, and Dan referred in his report, speaking with city staff earlier this week, our board did want to clarify for the record that the ability to provide a slate of potential candidates to the Centre's nomination committee is simply a right that may be exercised, but not an obligation that must be exercised. I think this is implicit in the governing provincial legislation, but we just wanted to clarify that the recommendation is not mandating that the gallery must provide an annual list of 3 potential board candidates, but rather that the gallery has the opportunity to do so if we so choose. Thank you very much.
Pardon me. Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Marsh.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce, for coming in and speaking so eloquently. I want to ask you if it just so happened that there were an individual or individuals who sat on both boards of a resident organization and the Centre in the Square, going forward, do you, in your opinion, is it the case that it would be a conflict of interest?
So I think you're addressing a specific potential circumstance because there are multiple cross-directorships, one of which is the actual a specific board appointee. I think in that particular instance of the specific board appointee, the view is that there's no need for that to continue. As to various other individuals who are on multiple boards throughout the community, I'm not sure that we're necessarily indicating that they are limited as to their volunteerism in the community and that they can't be on one or the other as long as they understand what their roles and fiduciary duties and confidentiality obligations are to both boards. And in fact, that there would be no lines of sort of direct communication and reporting between the two organizations through that individual.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There are no further questions. And finally, Mr. Andrew Bennett, the Executive Director of the KW Symphony.
Good afternoon. I hope to be uncharacteristically brief. I would like to acknowledge the fact that the process itself has been excellent in every way, both in terms of the quality of communication and the seriousness. It's been a very solid and very productive process. I would just like to add, if you like, my own layman's view on the question of cross-pollination of boards. For those who are very much involved in this question, the technicalities have been discussed in this discussion which we've just been having. But in layman's terms, perhaps, it's worth stating that it is possible to see the discontinuation of this arrangement as somehow a loss for either of the two resident organisations. That is simply not the case. The previous practice was no longer viable, especially in the light of more recent provincial legislation. And so it was actually, in our view, unhelpful as an arrangement, and it was certainly not workable. And so we are very pleased that we've come up with another solution, which you've just been informed about. And without more ado, I'd simply like to say that the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony is very happy with and supports the proposals as tabled. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions, Mr. Bennett. Thank you. Okay, we are now open for questions of staff. Councillor Fernandez.
I probably should have asked this question of the Centre in the Square, but if staff can answer it, then that's fine. Is there an executive board at the Centre in the Square and then there's a board, or is it just one board?
Mr. Chapman.
Through the chair, I can answer that question. Depending on where it goes, Mr. Gordon may need to come forward. There is an executive committee, which is a committee of the board and has certain responsibilities. And then there is the board in its entirety.
Okay, and then there's a board below that.
Not below that. The executive committee would be a committee of the board.
Similar to a financial committee is a committee of council?
Potentially. I think an executive committee is always a unique committee in the corporate structure. It is typically endowed with certain executive powers independent of the board, and others which require board oversight and approval. Okay.
I guess we're talking about better communication all around, and my question would be related to what kind of communication and open and transparent processes will this change? Is the executive board open and transparent to the full board on all matters that they're discussing?
Mr. Chapman?
Through Mr. Chair, all I can advise is that did not come out of the review as an issue requiring attention. So Mr. Gordon may wish to elaborate, but that did not become part of the scope of our review because it was not raised by stakeholders as an area requiring attention.
If I may, in many organizations, a board has a subset of committees who are given powers to do some things, limited, prescribed in advance. Other things they can discuss, but they have to be brought back to the full board. That is the case in the Centre in the Square. It's the case in some of our partner organizations. So on communication, for example, the two chairs, Catherine Code and I, have already met a couple of times, and we've got them scheduled for the rest of the season, if you want to put it that way, through next May. I've approached Bryce to set that up the same way with the art gallery. It is our expectation that Operations to operations will meet very frequently. The chairs will meet every 4 to 6 weeks. The executive committees, and this is not yet approved on both sides, on all 3 sides, but should probably meet a couple of times a year. What's good, what's bad, what are the pressures? And the boards, the full boards, should probably meet once a year saying, what's your strategy, what's our strategy, and do they align? And to the best of my knowledge, everybody that I have talked to has agreed with that proposed communication. Does that,
Yep.
sorry,
That
very broad.
That essentially covers off the question that I had. As I mean, sometimes executive boards don't always. Maybe can you give us an example of something that the executive board may deal with that would not necessarily have to, the board would have to deal with?
Certainly. It's executive committee. It's a committee of the board. In their authorities are such things as approving contracts with outsourcers that are bigger than management's authority, but aren't so big they have to go to the full board. So the executive committee could approve that and then take that to the next full board meeting saying, we recommend this be approved.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the examples. I have a couple more questions. How much? I've got 2 minutes. Okay. On page 3-9, there's sort of a lengthy paragraph. I had to read it a number of times, and I'm just trying to get my head around what exactly it means, and I'll just read out sort of portions of it. The struggle has clearly been articulated by members of the Centre and the Square Board as well, often stating it does not feel that its current relationship with Council allows it to truly function as a board. Can I have a better understanding of what that means? The 3rd paragraph, middle of the page.
Mr. Chapman? Through the chair, I think that statement is with reference to the statement that comes before it, and that is the struggle that many local boards face in the conflict between acting like good business people and acting in the public interest. So quite often, Council will establish a board to act in the public interest or to serve the public good, and staff it with people from the business sector who bring specific business expertise to it. And that can create a conflict at times, and I think we've seen it in the case of the Centre and the Square. The tension between profitability and driving revenue and commercial interest versus Council's public interest expectations. So I think that conflict was identified through discussions with the Centre, through the Webb report, through the Artsbuild report. The mandate seeks to clarify that to an extent, but it's an issue that requires constant attention.
Okay. That was it. Thank you.
Councillor Uneski?
Yeah, I need from staff a clarification on the process of this nominee. The current representatives that are from the Symphony and the Art Gallery sitting on the sits, that they'll be disbanded. And there'll be 2 new residential organization nominees that will be presented by the Symphony and then another one presented by the Art Gallery, and the Centre and the Square Board will consider whether they will accept those nominees. Is that the way I understand it?
Through the chair, almost entirely correct, yes. The expectation is not that the Centre would consider whether or not to accept them, but the Centre would choose one from that list of nominations. The original legislation that established the Centre said 2 seats shall be held by people who are nominees of the Art Gallery and the Symphony. Historically, that meant those 2 resident organizations sent a board member to sit on the Centre's board. The recommendation before you would say they will put forward a list of 3 people each at a minimum. The Centre will choose from those lists, and none of those people will be current sitting board members of the Art Gallery or the Symphony.
Okay, and I see where you're coming from. Then how will they represent the interests of the Art Gallery and the Symphony if they're not members of that board?
I think Mr. Craker summarized it well. They'll simply be friends of those institutions. So I take it that the Art Gallery would put forward people who are familiar with and supporters of the visual arts, have some familiarity, and are patrons of the KW Art Gallery, and therefore can take informed positions at the Centre Board with respect to the visual arts. art galleries, those sorts of things. But they need not be a sitting member of the KW Art Gallery Board.
Okay, I appreciate it. And the same thing would be with the symphony. Somebody interested in the musical component of the orchestra. Well, then if the nominees are presented to the Centre in the Square, are they obligated to take one of those two if they feel it's acceptable? But if they don't feel they want those two, can they turn them down?
I don't think that that's prescribed in detail here. I think that would have to be a discussion point between board chairs. But at the end of the day, the legislation says that 2 members shall be nominees of those 2 organizations. So that's a right that they currently hold. We're proposing a change in terms of how it's administered, but ultimately they have the right to put nominees forward that will sit on the Centre board.
Okay, I know where you come from. Thank you.
Councillor Marsh?
Thank you. So I really like this report, and it's clear. I like the recommendation about the communication, chair to chair, executive to executive, but I'm wondering, do you have it explicitly clear as to how the Centre in the Square staff and board will communicate with city staff when it comes to, and council, when it comes to, the responsibilities about the facility asset management?
Through the chair, no, not yet. So we've tried to identify a direction here, but that really is the work over the next 6 months to flesh out that plan in more detail.
Okay.
Ms. Fletcher is behind me, and so I would suggest that as a part of the 2017 budget process, you can expect a lot more clarity around that point.
Right. So then this is more of an update, and at this point, it's not the end of this process. This is a year-long process, right, that you will be coming back with further recommendations?
With respect to capital?
With respect to this this Centre in the Square's relationship with its resident.
No, I would suggest that all of the recommendations are concrete recommendations that you can move forward with and will be implemented. Even the capital recommendations set a direction, but what you don't have in front of you today is a detailed capital forecast that shows, a $7 million backlog in capital investment, how that will be funded and when, and how we're going to relate around that. That's work that still needs to be done over the next couple of months, and we expect to have more clarity on that for next year's budget process.
So then, regarding the, I have those in my mind about, when we went on a tour last year or earlier this year, it was clear to me that the communication about those upkeep needs have not been communicated to the point where the urgency has been heard. And so I'm wondering, are we at a critical point in terms of urgency that needs to be funded in 2016 to improve the Centre in the Square's physical, anything to do with its facility in order to keep it at a usable level?
So I'll answer, and then perhaps the board chair can comment as well. My understanding is that the Centre has been doing a good job of addressing the critical health and safety core building requirements. The issue that we have not tackled is the fact that we have a 35-year-old building for which we're going to require major dollars for building renewal over time. That's the challenge that's ahead of us and the one that we plan to work through this year. But to answer your question, is there anything that poses an immediate risk to life, health, or safety? My understanding from the board chair is that they've been doing their own due diligence and are satisfied they've been addressing those issues.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes, there has been a health and safety audit, and anything that was critical to safety has been dealt with. There are some outstanding items from that are on the list that Mr. Chapman referred to. The list is longer than any of us could accomplish in 1 year, either financially or physically. And as Mr. Chapman pointed out, the next step is to chunk that out, look for any other support that we can get through provincial funds, federal funds, any matching, and then come up with the exact plan for how much in what year.
Okay, thank you. One more question, and just regarding the KW Symphony's former relationship with Centre in the Square, where it was housed within the building, has that been on the table of discussion, or is that off the table?
In the past, it wasn't clear who was responsible for capital and who was responsible for what could be deemed operational or facility maintenance. And I think the list that's in your plan has been developed jointly, and there is agreement. The one part where Mr. Chapman correctly pointed out, if Centre in the Square management goes to the board and say we want to do something cosmetic, that should be the Centre in the Square's responsibility.
So just let me clarify my question if it wasn't clear. Is the Centre in the Square's relationship with the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, within that relationship, are you considering having the Symphony do any rehearsals or having their offices move back into the facility of the Centre in the Square?
Those are open for discussion but have not been discussed at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh?
Yeah, just confirming from the earlier questions as well, that this is a very overview document, that there's a lot of discussion that's still left to be ironed out, correct? But it does give a general overview direction as to where we're heading.
That's correct. I think, though, if you approve it today, we will immediately implement the change with respect to the board nomination process, so that will be a change effective immediately. Things like the communication process, the approach to capital, this sets the direction, but you're right, more work is required.
Good. And just kind of give us kind of an indication, when would we be receiving a little bit more in-depth report as to how these discussions are proceeding forward and where we're at? Are we looking at mid-2016 or as part of the 2017 budget preparation process?
Through the chair, with respect to capital then, is that?
I'd say capital and some of the other directions that have come through this document as well, but more primarily capital.
So I think we envision that there's 6 months of work to be done. That's what the report outlines. So we believe that for our earliest budget reports for next year, that's when we can start to communicate it.
Good.
We need to develop a plan first and then present that.
Good.
For the balance of it, I think the goal is for city staff to withdraw from this process, right? That there's agreement around the direction, and so really it's between the boards of the Centre, the Art Gallery, and the Symphony to move ahead with their communications protocol, their nomination process, et cetera. So any reporting on that would come through those respective boards.
Good, as long as, at least the capital component of it, that's reported kind of in advance to the budget process. So there's time for a healthy engagement. And finally, now there's a recommendation for increase for operational funding to the 1.75 million from 1.4. And again, it will continue speaking to the terms of that the City of Kitchener with the CITS Incorporation will share surpluses and fill deficits as well, right?
Yes, that's been the long-standing agreement. I think in this transition window to fully implement the new mandate, that won't be the reality. Our understanding is that the Centre forecasts some costs or losses to fully transition to that new mandate and is looking for transitional support. Once we're through that transition period, we would revert to that old previous understanding.
Okay, all right. As long as we have that understanding well in advance, so there are no surprises for next year. Thank you.
No further questions. Mayor Verbenovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it would be my pleasure to move the recommendation that's before us today. And just again, adding to my comments, I want to, from earlier, in moving the motion, a lot of work has been done in getting us to this point over the probably the last couple of years, actually. But you know what? We're talking about, number one, a facility that is an integral part of the cultural life of our community, a facility that is home to many of the foundational organizations that are part of the arts and culture scene in our community. And I think it was certainly a worthwhile process to go through all of the discussions, both in terms of mandate, governance, and so on, over the past couple of years, to really now set the organization on a great foundation for the next 35 plus years of its history in this community. So I do want to again thank not only the chair and the board members from the Centre in the Square, but the board members of all of the partner organizations and the staff of the partner organizations that have been part of getting us to this point.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I just want to state that I will be supporting the recommendation that's before us, and I too want to compliment all the parties, the individuals who have come together for a number of months and have really worked hard, and there's been a tremendous willingness to cooperate, and I think as a result we're ending up with a product that was even better than it was before. And also our staff, Mr. Chapman and also Mr. Watkins, have done a tremendous amount of work over and above their normal duties and their current positions with the city. And as a result of all of this, I've been involved with this for many years. I was involved back when the council of the day had many arguments as to the establishment of the Centre in the Square. It was an issue that came back to council on a number of occasions before it was finally approved. It took a number of years to get it finally approved. I can remember in the process of having to defend the decision of council at the Ontario Municipal Board. And then over the years, as a senior City of Kitchener official, I did work very closely with the Centre, and I can really relate to a lot of the hardships that we encountered. And then in my current life, I've spent a number of years on the board. And I really believe that the product that was established, that came out over 35 years ago, the whole concept of the Centre in the Square, and our arts and culture program in this city it was a tremendous thing. And after 35 years, it needed to be tweaked a little, and that's what has resulted in the past year and a half. And I think now with the recommendations that are coming forward, we're ending up with an even better product that will be a tremendous asset to not only our entire community, but to the entire region. And it will serve us well, I'm sure, for at least another 35 years, if not longer. So I would hope that all the members of council will support the recommendation that's before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yaneski.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very much of an arts supporter myself, playing in an orchestra here in town and attend the symphony concerts and other concerts that are at the Centre in the Square. Also a former board member back in the last term, and seeing the issues and the details of problems that need to be addressed in terms of building maintenance and the operations of the building, and putting on the performances by all the different groups, either locally or traveling groups that come to our city. I compare the Centre in the Square similar to the auditorium. I mean, the City of Kitchener owns the Odd, and even though the Rangers are the home team that are in there, and we have trade shows and a variety of rental uses of the facility, the city still owns the building, takes care of the maintenance. It does what has to be done to keep the building, which is 70 years old, twice the age of the Centre in the Square, and we take care of that building. Here we have a Centre in the Square that was basically put into the board's hand in terms of taking maintenance, and I think when the regulations and rules and policies were set back 35 years ago, we had a brand new building, nothing needed to be done, it was moving along gracefully, and now 35 years later, plumbing needs to be done, air conditioning, roofing, or whatever, and those are major expenses, and it becomes a real challenge for the Centre in the Square board to address these major issues if the funds aren't there, and they're always looking to stay above board, and that's why they're here on an annual basis to ask for financial support. Dealing with these big issues, in my opinion, just responsibility of the city. We're the owner of the building, and we should be taking care of those. Now, granted, it was pointed out if it's cosmetic improvements to make it easier for the artists in terms of the improvements, the Center of the Square can address those. But the major issues of furnace issues and air conditioning, I think, comes down to city's responsibility, and I'm prepared to see that this is one of the options that are here to be addressed on a satisfactory basis with both parties. I'm prepared to support this motion because I think it's moving forward. We have a gem of an asset here in our community, and I think it needs highly support from the entire council here this afternoon.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I just want to add my thanks and appreciation to all involved in these discussions to see such unified and positive support of what you brought together is really, really heartwarming for me, and I'm sure others around the Horseshoe here. So thank you very, very much for this. It's great going forward with all this positivity.
Councillor Ioannidis.
I'll just make this quick. I just from when this first started off, seeing all of the executives here of all the organizations, they didn't have many smiles on their face, and today they all have smiles on their face, and I don't think it's because it's Monday that they're smiling though.
Councillor Singh.
Yes, also very quickly, I think this is an example of collaboration and cooperation, and I think it's an example that it can be done in a community, and just appreciation and thanks to all the groups involved.
Thank you, and I will close before, actually, do we have a mover for this? Oh, Mayor Vanovich, that's right. I'll just close by saying that, there were some significant challenges when we began this process, and I had my concerns along the way, the resident organizations had their concerns along the way, and the fact that we're in a position now that I'm hearing some almost completely positive feedback, I'm very happy at the place that we're in now. The resident organizations have some clarity. The Center in the Square board has some clarity. I really think we're more at the beginning, the starting line than the finish line at this point. I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of determining who does what, who's responsible for what. But now we can go out and start, getting the world-class acts that will mirror the resident organizations that we already have. So it's been moved, and no one's asked for a recorded vote. Thank you. I think it's appropriate. A recorded vote has been called. Those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Before we move on to the next item, Mr. Wilmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly there's been a lot of thanks and congratulations being stated right now, and I totally support those. I want to extend a particular thanks to the staff that have been involved in this process. Several of them are here today: Cynthia Fletcher, Rod Regier, Dan Chapman, and there were others. I know that from hearing from the stakeholder organizations over quite a bit of time that they had confidence in the process, and there's no doubt in my mind that's because of the people that we had involved in that process. We're here today, and the improvements that have been recommended and now endorsed by committee are the result of a very challenging and complex situation. That's not news to anyone, and so I extend particular appreciation to Dan Chapman for leading this process. The improvements that are now endorsed will serve the Centre in the Square well, as well as the resident organizations and this corporation, and most importantly, this community. And so, Dan, I thank you for your outstanding work on this.
Very good. So there's a lot of folks that were here for that item. I want to warn you that the next item is literally a policy on policies, so you may wish to exit. Okay, with that, there is no presentation in this item, so we will get right into questions of staff. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I'm fully prepared to move the recommendation if we're ready to do that. I didn't have any questions. It looked straightforward to me.
I don't see any questions in the queue. I would almost. Councillor Gazzola.
I'm sorry. No, I just And maybe it said something in here, but is this included in our business plan?
The question is it included in our business plan?
Is this a carryover, or is this a new item on our business plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's a carryover from the 2014, so it is incorporated as part of our 2015 and then our 2016 work plans.
It's one of the 79. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
Trying to word this carefully. I had to read this a couple of times before I really got this, and maybe it's because it's a policy document, so I guess the sphere diagram, when I looked at the bottom notes, am I to understand that this diagram, it comes from a 1985 document?
Our co-op student, Alicia Aladina, is here to answer any questions. She did the lion's share of the work on this, so I'll get her to respond to you on that.
Yes, it does.
Okay. I guess I'm puzzled that that's a 30-year-old kind of sphere. Was there nothing else that you could find that was a little bit more update that talked about mission, policy, administration, management? Or maybe you can sort of explain how this is functioning a little bit better than what's in the document, like exactly what we're looking at here.
So,
Okay.
Through the chair, the document is just explaining that council and administration will continue to have distinct spheres, but it's another idea where there's a notion of shared roles and reciprocal influence and mutual support when it comes to policy making.
Okay. I really appreciate the fact that we have a co-op student doing this work. I think that's fantastic, because I think it really gives them some real life experience. That's a comment and not a question. But I'm just trying to find my other questions. I apologize that I'm not finding them as quickly as I should, and that's delaying the process. One of the comments in the report was that there's a shift in culture, and that overall we're seeing more administrative functions and procedures as opposed to policies, and there seems to be a very clear delineation between the policy and governance and the administration that staff take on. If this sphere that you're describing said that there's some overlap, I'm not sure that I see the overlap in that sphere. I see some very clear mission for council, for example. Policy maybe halfway, but administration and management, there is very, very minimal influence from council on that. Is that how it's perceived?
Through the chair, during the... Sorry.
Pardon me. There you go. You don't have to click your button anymore. Just you can leave it on.
Through the chair, during the comprehensive review of the policies, we found that in the policies that we currently have right now in Kitchener, there's a lot of intertwining between procedure and policy in one policy. So what this master of policies is trying to do is just to separate the procedural aspects from the policy so we can easily identify what the policy is and what the procedure is.
Okay. And can I just have a question? Who had asked for this review? Was it council that asked for this review, or was it a staff initiative?
It was a staff initiative, through you, Mr. Chair, that had been sort of outstanding for a couple of years, and so we wanted to move this forward. We had been noting that there were policies that were somewhat out of date and others that really needed to be amended and some even to be repealed. So this is something that staff took the initiative on.
Okay. I guess my only concern, and I've said this before, is that as we review policies, and it's indicated in here that some policies will not come to council and will just go through the corporate leadership team, and others will. I've always been of the viewpoint that any policy that
Councillor
affects
Fernandez,
the public...
is this a question?
Yep.
Okay.
Any policy that affects the public should come to council. So, trying to sort of wade through the report, I was trying to see how we're going to decide to do that. I guess it wasn't clear to me. Maybe it was clear to other councillors, but it wasn't clear to me.
So there are two things, actually. Number one was the criteria that was developed to make that distinction between council and administrative policies. And you'll notice with the criteria that there's still the respect for council as the authoritative elective body. But the second step also, too, is that before any decisions are made with respect to what policy will be council or administrative, we will be bringing that list forward to council to make that decision on whether you agree with staff assessment as to whether or not that existing policy truly is council or administrative in nature.
Okay, thank you very much for your response.
Councillor Marsh?
A couple questions. First question is regarding the housekeeping edits that are required yet for some of the policies. It's noted on 4-2. Why are those not ongoing? Why do we still have in our policy, for example, reference to GM when we've had the DCAO position for a long time?
And that's a very good question, and shows where we didn't have a regular process in place for reviewing corporate policies. So that's one of the changes that we're proposing, is that policies will have a regular review period. So those kinds of changes we'll be keeping up with as we move forward through in the organization.
Okay, sounds good. Second question is on 4-3, just this chart. So it shows, from the way I read it, that the council sphere does include all 4 levels, although very little to do with management, but that we would suggest management changes to managers and review organizational performance. In what way, how would that happen? I don't understand. Is that all of council, or is that, I know that in our role we do not direct staff directly, so I just want to understand, like as an individual, I as a councillor do not direct staff to do certain things, so how are we suggesting management changes?
So the diagram is not meant really to be taken in quite a literal sense.
I took it literally. Okay, all right.
Really what the line is showing is that at some point in time, both council and staff have some sort of role and responsibility in conjunction with each other. So as Alicia explained, it's sort of complementary roles rather than that severe political administrative dichotomy where, council stays on one side and staff totally stay on the other. And so that line is somewhat fluid depending on the policy, depending on the culture.
I still think it might be worth consideration in what way, when it gets to that lowest level of council involvement, in what way does that play out? I think it's worth considering, but maybe not at this moment. The last question I have is just regarding the policy manual being only available in electronic format, mentioned on 4-11. Why not a few paper copies?
That is another challenge with respect to making sure that policies are kept up to date, and when we have hard copies floating around, it's very difficult to make sure that they're always up to date. So having the electronic version is much easier for us to manage, but certainly anyone can go in at any time and print off any policy and make it hard copy for themselves if they should so desire.
Well, I would humbly suggest that within this policy of policies that we also require that staff show that they have read the most recent policies from time to time, and perhaps that's already a practice in place, but when you have it in hard copy and people can initial that they have read it, that's easier in some cases, but I'm going to leave that to staff and not ask for comment. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I've since received an answer to my question, but I'd like to repeat it. The purpose of this report today is just to say that staff are going to go ahead and review the policies, but everything is going to come back to council, and they're going to say, this goes in column 1, this goes in column 2, but everything is coming back to council.
That's correct.
Just an answer to, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Does staff agree with you? Or?
Yep, I made sure I got I'm fairly certain, but I got the professional nod over there. So no further questions. It's been moved by Councillor Galloway-Sealock. Those in favor? That carries unanimously, and that also concludes Finance and Corporate Services. Thank you. We will get right into Community Infrastructure Services. Oh, there's been a 5-minute bathroom break.